on, so it's like time has no meaning. So welcome to 2020. Just like everything else has been, we are super happy to have you here with us this morning. Thank you for tuning in. If you're with us in the chat, please let us know where you're from, what you teach, and if you have any questions. We are super happy to help you out and get those answered for you today. We have a wonderful show coming up for you this morning from 8:30 to 11:30. We are going to start with Kathleen Receiver and Cara Barella talking about using read and write to support all students during distance learning. That's going to be from 8:30 to 9:30. Then we're going to be talking about accessing in-person and translation services with our JCPS Language Service group. At 10 o'clock, we move into PPE basics for COVID-19. That is personal protective equipment for those of you who aren't in the know. And then we go to 10:30, we have PPE and COVID-19 for our special needs staff. And then finally at 11 o'clock, we will end with the impact of secondary stress on educators with Sarah Fangman. So it's going to be a wonderful show today. We are super excited to have you here. You can check out that schedule, by the way, if you go to jcps.me/NTI. That is the NTI 2.0 website. And you can click on the Teacher Toolkit and go to the virtual training schedule from there. You can also follow us on Twitter at JCPSDig, and that stands for Digital Innovation. And whenever you tweet at us, use the hashtag JCPSDigin, so we can give you a like, we can give you a retweet, and we can give you some love with that. And if you're watching this morning, if you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, please make sure you do. That way you are notified every time we go live, every time we post a new video, so you can stay in the know and you can have the power of pause to come back and watch whenever you like. So, I've already talked enough this morning. Kathleen and Cara, we are super happy to have you here today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Matt. I'm excited really to have Cara here with me. She is a third grade teacher at Coral Ridge. So thank you so much, Cara, for joining us this morning. How are you doing?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to show everyone about read and write. I'm doing awesome on this great Wednesday morning.
That's right. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right, we should be good to go, Matt. Okay, so as Matt said, we are going to talk with you this morning about read and write. It is a literacy support tool for all learners. You may have heard of it in the past called Read, Write, Gold. And the district, it's super exciting. They have purchased this for all students and staff. So you have access to this for your students through your Google Chrome browser. And again, my name is Kathleen Receiver, and this is Cara Barella. All right, so what exactly is read and write? Some people don't really know what this toolbar is. It is a literacy support toolbar, and it's designed to help students and adults with their reading, writing, study, and research support. So some people ask, well, if my student in my class gets a reader on the K-Prep, can they use this read and write toolbar for that? And the answer is no, they wouldn't use this exact toolbar. However, if it is in their IEP to have a reader and a toolbar support, and they are using this read and write toolbar all year long, the building, the back at the school can help you set up the K-Prep toolbar. So K-Prep, they actually have a toolbar that students use that will read to them. So yes, it's possible to do that for the K-Prep, but you wouldn't use the read and write toolbar. So I like to point that out. There is a read and write Google extension. There's also a read and write iPad app, and both of these have already been pushed out to your devices. So if your students or you sign in to your Google Chrome browser, you will see those extensions. And that's what we're going to talk to you about today. So the first thing that I want to make sure that you understand is kind of the boring stuff, but it's important, and Cara will let you know this, that you have to model this for your students. So once your students sign into the Chromebook, they're going to have to give some permissions in order for read and write to work. So the first thing is you have to make sure you are using the Chrome browser. If you're using a Chromebook, perfect, you don't have to worry about that. But if you're on a PC or a Mac, and you want to use the Google extension, you must use the Google Chrome browser. Secondly, you want to make sure that you are logged in with your JCPS account. If you're logged in with a personal Gmail account, you will not have, and your students won't have, these features. So make sure that you've done those things, and then you will have to go through and give permission. So the students will do the same. They will click on their email address, and then this box will pop up, and they're going to click on allow the first time that they use it. And if there's ever a big update, it may prompt them to do this again. One big question, and this presentation will be in the I'm sorry about that. This presentation will be in the notes on our YouTube channel, so you can have all this information. But teacher access, you must fill out this form if you are a JCPS teacher and you want to have full access. So to do that, you would just fill in the information. You can list myself, Kathleen Receiver, as the district administrator for Read and Write, and then you click submit. Once you do that, in about 24 to 48 hours, you will have the full access to that. And what I'm going to do right now, I don't know, let's see. If I click here, I'm going to show. Okay, there we go. All right, sorry about that. Okay, so another thing that Cara and I realized this week when we were practicing is you must make sure that the Read and Write is turned on in your browser. So for many of you, you may notice that it's there, but you don't see, it's not working. Something's not working. So if you go to your little gray puzzle piece and click on that, you will see a bunch of pins. And you want to make sure, like down at the bottom, you'll see Screenshot Reader and Text Help Reader. You want to make sure that pin is blue. If those are not blue, it's not going to work for you when you go to use it. And the same thing for your students. Everything I'm telling you today, you want to make sure that your students do the exact same thing. And the last thing is when tools are being used on the toolbar, they're going to be underlined in purple, and we will show you that in a moment. All right, so Cara, like I said, I'm going to kind of drop out of this presentation and go live a little bit. It's just a little bit easier. But the Check It tool is the first one that we're going to talk about once I close out of here. There we go. All right, so when you're in a Google slide presentation or a Google Doc, you are able to use this toolbar. And up here in the far right, you'll see those extensions. I have my Read Write, a little bird, which is called the Screenshot Reader, and then that PDF toolbar. Earlier, Cara couldn't find that, so we had to go to her puzzle piece, like I said, and make sure it was blue and turned on. So
yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Kathleen. I was just going to say the importance of making sure that all of your permissions are on too with those. So if you go into your permission settings, making sure that you're allowing it to read your stuff. And so that way you can use it. And that way it's also pinned and turned on. So you just go to manage extensions from there and then make sure you're allowing all those permissions, because the PDF reader will not work unless you allow it to happen.
Yes, and that's perfect example. As adults, we may do that, but our students, so great troubleshooting here. If there's something they can't access it, you want to make sure that they've allowed. And you can get to that by those three little dots and manage extensions. Good point. All right, here. Okay, so I'm in this Google slide right now. And if I click on Read and Write, you can see that my toolbar pops up. And the first tool that I want to talk about is Check It. Check It is like a spell check is what it does basically, but you can see it's not here. So depending if you're using a Google slide or a Google Doc, you may have a few tools that don't show up. So right here, you can see the little circle with the check mark. When I click on that, it turns purple. So that's telling me that it's ready to spell check my document. Here you can see there's purple lines, which what a great color they chose to use. Underneath words, sometimes it will not, if you have, some students like to put a bunch of extra spaces. My daughter does this all the time in between words. It does not catch that, but it will catch the spellings. So that is your Check It tool. And again, not on the slides, just on the doc. Do you have anything? Have you used that yet with your kids, Cara?
I have not used it yet, but my kids use it themselves. So although I have not pointed it out that tool, they will use it themselves because like students want to do. They want to see all the cool features that are on their Chromebook. So a lot of your students may even know about Read and Write, and you may not even know that they know, but they've already checked it out. So they also could be kind of the teachers in this aspect, and they're able to show you what they already know. But I know that using Check It is a huge thing for them, especially through a Chromebook and virtually. We can't teach them all of the grammar that we need to, but the Check It tool helps with the things that we can't check while we're face to face usually.
Good point. Good point. And also, so for teachers that may not be as comfortable or they don't know a lot about Read Write, just like Cara said, I would guarantee that a lot of your students have already seen that little purple RW and they want to see what it is. So they've checked it out and they very well could be using it. So good point. The next tool that I want to show you is the dictionary and the picture dictionary. So those are here in the slides and they are in the Google Doc as well. And what happens when I click on the dictionary tool, if I have selected text, it will give me the definition. So I'm going to go over, because I have text already pulled up here, and I'm going to select, I don't know what cloth is. Click on cloth and click on the dictionary. So it gives me the noun of that and the definition, and it tells me that it's a noun. If the students click on the play button,
noun, a type of fabric that is woven or knitted,
it will read it to them. So that's awesome as well. And the other thing that is right next to it is the picture dictionary. So it does just what it says. If the students select a word, you can double click on a word and click on the picture dictionary. It will read it to them.
Cloth.
And it gives them the picture. The other thing they can do with that picture on a slide, I believe whoops, it just went to, oh, funny, it went to Juanita. They can click on it and drag it into their document. So that's the dictionary and the picture dictionary. Pretty self-explanatory there. I know my students, when I use this with them, they like to drag the pictures, the clip art images it gave them into their presentations.
Yes.
The next one is the biggest one. It's Read and Write. It's the reading tool. So we're going to take a few minutes to talk about these. Not only can you use Read and Write on the Google Slides, but you can also use it in a Google Doc and on the web, on a website. So obviously the play button will play the text. You have pause and stop. And if I go over here to this website and I select the text and click on my little Read Write icon here, and I can press play, and it's going to read. It's going to read the text that I selected. If students do not click on text and they just press play, sometimes it will go through and read every single thing on the page, or like right now, it doesn't do anything. So they need to make sure they're selecting what exactly it is they want Read Write to read. Now, if it's reading too fast for them, there are settings that you can go through with your kids, and this is individual setting for each child. And they would do that by clicking on these three little dots. So if you don't know this already, anytime you see three dots, there's normally a menu behind it. So just like with the Google Chrome browser, these three dots are horizontal. If I click on the three dots and go to options, here I can choose my voice if I want Ava to read to me, or there's also a US Tom if someone would rather have the male voice, you can do that as well. And let's see, a lot of these say offline because you have to install them. So we're not going to go through that today, but you can change the different voices to different people. You can also change the speed. So if you wanted to slow down, going too fast, you can slow down here. These boxes, if for some students, and when I taught in reading, I didn't want them to have continuous reading on because they wouldn't pay attention. So I wanted to speak on the sentences for my younger students, my first graders, and they would have to actually click on the next sentence to have it be read to them. So that's an option, but you don't have to mess with any of these. And then you can press OK. So I did want to point out that those settings are there for you to look at. Did you want to add anything about the play or reading on the web or the Google Doc, Cara?
Yes, I was gonna say this tool is so awesome for your kids to use, especially virtually, because as a teacher, and when you're teaching your students, you usually have the kids who maybe they don't know how to pronounce a word, or it looks a little weird and they're like, I've never seen that word before. Well, this tool is so awesome because virtually, if they're not right next to you, you're not working one-on-one with them, and they need help with a word, they can use this, even just highlighting a single word, and it will read it to them. So that way it will help them right then and there, as you can't help them right then and there.
Exactly. And I hope that this show helps others to realize that we have this available so they can use it. So like we said, just the play, pause, and stop is on the web, the Google Doc or slide, but there's also some other reading tools that you may not be aware of. One of them being the screenshot reader. And that's this little box with the arrow. Now over here, you also have the screenshot reader bird. And like I said, this has been pushed out. You have to have this on for this tool to work. So if you don't see it up in your toolbar, make sure you click on that puzzle piece. And this is, blue. The little pin is blue. So what the screenshot reader does is if you have text on a website, or I know many teachers love to use the Bitmoji Google Classrooms. If you have text on the website, like in a picture, students can't, the read and write tool will not read that. So for text, what the students can do is they can click on that, and it gives them a little plus sign, and then they're able to like draw a little box around text. And then it will go through what's called OCR, and it will read it to them.
Your lesson will go. Proceed here. UE.
So that one's kind of small, but if it were larger, they'd be able to click on it and have that read to them. So keep that in mind with the Bitmoji Classroom. Some of your students may not be able to read that text, and then read and write can't read it because it's in a cute picture. So that can also be done on the web. If you go here, and I didn't know that this word was votes, I could select that word, and then it would read
1076.
Except for, I don't know why it said 1076, but it will read the word to them. You can see in this picture, it's kind of the poster she's holding, Votes for Women, is kind of bent a little bit. So when it's straight, it really does do that. All right. So we have those two reading tools. And the last one is the PDF reader tool. And this one's a little kind of special in that whenever you use it, you can either read a PDF that's on the web or from your Google Drive. And this is something that Cara and this is where we realized, she didn't have permission set or it pinned and it wasn't working for her. But also we realized the same for me. So whenever I open a PDF, and you can see this is from my Drive because there's a little Google Drive icon here. If you assign your students a passage that's a PDF from your Google Classroom, they may need help with reading it. One thing you can do is show them that when they open that up, there's a little open with here. So if it's saved in your Google Drive and you've given them access to view it, they're going to get this option and they need to click on Open with Read and Write. So once I do that, it opens up the Read and Write PDF toolbar. And then I'm able to use that to read the text. So here I have the click to speak. When I click on that and it's purple, that means it's being in use. And what I can do is click on any word or sentence.
A picture of the extraordinary.
And it'll read it for me. So that's my favorite tool to use. It's just easier than selecting a bunch of text and pressing play, in my opinion. But for others, they may not like it. So the click to speak.
The rainbow fence.
That's how that works. And I'm going to click on it again to make it go off. Or I can select text and press play. You can see that you also have the picture dictionary and the dictionary tool here as well. So you can use either one of those. And you also have what else? You have the screenshot reader. So again, if there was text like right here with reading A to Z, I can't select that. So I could click on the screenshot reader, take a screenshot, and then it'll read that to me.
Benchmark passage.
That's weird that did it in Tom's voice and not Ava's, but that's okay. So the next one is the translator. And then you also have the highlighter tool, which isn't showing up for this PDF, and the screen masking. So there are a bunch of different tools that you can use here. And we're going to talk about those in a second. If a child just goes to a PDF from a website, Notice how you have the same tools, but these are not blocked out. So they can use these as well. The reason that they are not usable here is because I'm not the owner of this document. Cara is actually the owner of this document. So because she didn't give me edit access to it, I can't use these tools. But notice whenever I'm opening a PDF from the web, or if I opened one myself, these tools are available. So I wanted to make sure that I pointed that out. If you wonder why some of the tools aren't working or your students don't have access to them, that's an important thing to know. Did you have anything to add about that, Cara?
I was going to say, even though I'm the owner, so if I were to want to give Kathleen access or my students access, you can always give them editing rights and make a copy for each of them in Google Classroom too. And that'll give them those rights. So that way they are able to use the highlight or the text feature and all of those things as well.
You got it. And let's see, these are the differences here. So we have, and we'll talk about these few tools in a moment, but we have the text. So if I click on the typewriter, students are actually able to click anywhere in the document and they can type words. And those words, then they have the prediction tool here. They can talk and type, so they can speak into the microphone and it will type their words. They can change the font size as well as the color, or they can choose to delete that note.
And those notes are so awesome. The typewriter feature is so great for PDFs too, because when you're reading passages online, we're doing these things and we're asking students to find evidence in their text. And we'll talk a little bit more about the highlighting tool for that. But being able to write down their thoughts on the side, maybe stop, think, paraphrase as one of our Jan Richardson comprehension strategies. STP, stop, think, paraphrase. So stop, think, put that page on the PDF into your own words. What is it trying to tell you? Or just little notes along the way to help them remember what they're reading or what they're doing as well.
Exactly. I love that. So great example there on how you can use the typewriter. The next one is the push pin. So with the push pin, when you click on the push pin, this is great again for adding notes and pinning them. So I can actually pin it to that spot. And then the next one is the freehand drawing. So students could actually, depending on what directions you gave, they change their color. So I can make it purple. They can actually draw or circle different parts of the text on the PDF. The same thing with the shapes drawing. They can use the shape tool to draw different shapes. And there's your eraser, your triangle and circle. They can even change the thickness if they or you wanted to mess with that. And then the last one is, I found this PDF online. Maybe I want to save it to my drive. They give you the option to click here to save to your drive. So those are the different tools on the PDF reader. And I know that many of you are using PDF for your reading virtually. So this really is an important tool for your kiddos to know about and have access to.
And it's really awesome too, because you may think read and write, you may just associate it with reading. You're like, well, this is reading stuff. What if I'm a math teacher or I need to use it for something else? Well, that PDF tool, being able to hand write on that document, even if you're just presenting to your class, it's awesome so that your kids can see what you're drawing on the side for math or what you're circling and want to show them. And they can also use that tool when they want to show you work as well and want to show what they just did.
Love it. Awesome. So really important tools and strategies here for you to take back with you today. So great. The next one is the word prediction. So the little, glass ball here with the stars, that's the word prediction. And it does just what it says. My students loved this, and it really helped my struggling readers to get that confidence when they're writing. So when that is turned on, remember when I click on it, there's a purple line. It can be annoying if students don't want it on. So make sure they know to turn it back off. But as I'm typing, it does what it says. It's going to predict what I'm trying to say. And the more that you use it, the more it remembers how you write. And then the best part for my students is they're actually able to go over the word and read and hear what the word is.
Type.
So they know, okay, that's the word type. That's what I want. They're getting that confirmation on how to spell it and how it's pronounced. So that is the prediction tool. Have you used that, Cara? I forgot to ask you if you use that with your kids.
Yes, so the prediction tool is awesome because I know a lot, even without the prediction tool, a lot of kids want to use where they highlight the word and they want to see what other words they can use or what they can use next. So this prediction tool helps them kind of put their thoughts down and leads them to what they would want to write, even if they didn't know it, because sometimes our readers or any student struggle with what they want to write down and what you want them to write down. Maybe it's creative writing or any writing. They just don't know how to start. They don't know where to go from there. And this tool is awesome to help predict what they may want to do and helps them read it to them. So if they're like, well, I see a whole bunch of words on my screen, but I don't know what these words mean. Well, it says it for them. So that way, oh, I do know that word. That's how I write it. And it helps them that way as well.
Yes, exactly. And I want to point out, this isn't just for our primary or elementary teachers and students. There are some great ways that you can use this for middle and high school as well.
Oh, yes.
All right. So that's your word prediction. The next one, do you want to talk a little bit about the screen masking?
Yes, I love the screen masking. It is by far one of my favorite tools on Read and Write. And it's actually, as you saw on the screen, it is like a strip or a ruler you can use it as, and it uses one area to focus on as you drag your arrow through the screen. And the strip follows your cursor, and it's great for students who need help focusing. So virtually, it's harder to get them to focus, or maybe we're not by them, so it's harder to get them to focus with these things. Or if you're just presenting to your students, it's awesome to show certain sections that you only want them to see. And right now, as you're reading, you can see different words on the screen as well, but there's a setting you can always go to at the very top. You click that little wheel button and you can change the settings for it. So you can change the background color. Maybe the pink isn't their favorite. Maybe you want it to just be black so it's less distracting to them. And you can also change how dark and how light it is. If you want to focus on only one part of that screen, you can make it as dark as you want. So that way they can only focus on that one part. And that's an awesome tool for if you have tons of text on your document and you're like, well, I don't want my kids reading ahead of me. I want to focus on this one part. Well, this is an awesome tool because your kids will actually see all of this on their side when you're presenting your screen. So it's not just you seeing it. When you're sharing your screen, your kids will also see it as well. So it kind of helps them not jump ahead or be off task in that way. But I know I used these last year in my class. They're awesome little things. And I'm like, how can I use this virtually? Because you never know when a student needs this. And this screen masking is an awesome side tool to use, especially for kids who have trouble focusing, but maybe they have something with their eyes and you don't know it yet, because a lot of our students, it's hard to know with them and they're not going to tell you. And you may be thinking this person's excelling in this, but they're maybe not doing so well in reading or maybe math, and you don't know why. Well, this tool is awesome to use for that because it allows them to read left to right. It won't let them read up and down if you don't want them to. So that's a great tool for that as well.
Yep. And again, to turn that, well, and this, you'll find the students can move this around. So that will be fun for them.
Yes.
And move that around to get it out of your way. But just as a reminder, when you come back up, there's a purple line here. So to turn it off, you and the students would just click on that and then it goes away. So that's a really good tool. And I didn't even think about that until I was talking with Cara. Teachers, you are the experts. I've never taught during NTI before. And I thought, oh, wow, yeah, that would be, what an amazing tool for our kids virtually to know about.
Yes, and especially kids lose track all the time, especially if you're doing a running record or you're in math and they're looking all over the place. And it's hard to stay focused virtually for so long, but this screen masking tool helps them focus on that one part that you want them to, or if they're using it on their end like they can, it helps them focus on the one part that they need to without getting distracted. And I use it a lot in reading. It helps my kids. I don't usually black out all the words because, of course, my kids, I ask them why they wouldn't want that. And they tell me that, well, if I don't know what something means in a sentence, I want to be able to look around at the other sentences. So use those vocab strategy tools that they know to look at the other sentences and figure out what that word means. So this is a really awesome tool that helps them focus on different things.
And that's a good point too. Also picture clues, right? So if they had everything blacked out, they wouldn't be able to necessarily use those picture clues. So good point there. Okay, so the next one that we're going to talk about, just real briefly, whoops, let's turn this off here. So next to the screen masking, you have the talk and type. Talk and type does exactly what it says. Students speak and it will type what they are saying. But I don't know how much you really would want to use that because, let me turn off my prediction, under the tools in your Google Doc, if you didn't know, you have voice typing. So talk and type does the exact same thing as voice typing. Click on it, click on the microphone, and it will type whatever it is you are saying. So that's exactly the same thing that talk and type does. We do know that it will not type inside a Google slide. It only types down on the notes. So if you're using Google Slides, that it won't work. The talk and type won't work there. So just to let you know, if you were curious what that tool was. The next tool that we're going to talk about is the translator tool. So when you click on the translator tool, I do want to make sure everyone understands this translator tool is not meant to translate, entire documents of text. The purpose of the translator tool is for students, if you have EL students where Spanish is their native language and they don't know how to pronounce or say the word stared, whenever they select that word, they can press on play, and depending on the language setting, if it's Spanish or French or whatever it is, it will read that to them.
Mira fijamente.
So then they can understand, that means stared at someone, looked at someone. So that's what the translator tool does. It will work on the web, Google Docs, or slides. And just a reminder, people many times get confused. It will not, if I select all of this text, it will not translate it to Spanish for me.
And this is such an awesome tool too to use because we have such a big ESL and ELL population in JCPS. So even helping at home, this is such a big thing for our ESL and ELL populations that don't have that one-on-one help with us at all times. This can help them translate it in a better way when maybe they're working independently and they're not live with you. So this is such a great tool for that.
Exactly. Very important. And even for parents too, some of the parents may need help using it. So that here in a little bit, we'll show you where you can get parent resources to share this with your parents. So I went to the 3 dots in the top right corner of my toolbar and went down to language. So this is where you can choose if you want the features, meaning all of the features, what language you want that in. So for most of us, maybe English, or you may want to change it to Spanish or French. And then here is where you can change the language that the translator will do for you. So those are under the language tab here. Click cancel. Just let you know where those are so you can show your students. All right, my favorite tool is next. Cara, are you ready to talk about?
Oh, yes. It's one of my favorites too. So the next one is highlighting text. And I love this tool. You can use it in so many different ways. We said earlier when you want it to read to you. So if you want a document to read to you, you can use the other feature we pointed out before where it allows them to read, but also they can highlight whatever sentence they want to. So go ahead and every March people in the United States, and you can choose what color you want to highlight it with. Whichever one they want, whichever one you may want, but you can also hit the play button and it'll allow you to have it read as well.
Every March.
So select the text and hit play. Is that what you meant to say? Is
Yes.
that what you're saying? Yeah.
Yes, you highlight over it and then it'll let you do it that way.
The United States celebrate the achievements and history of.
So it's highlighting and going through the text as it's read to them.
Yes. And then this allows for students to highlight evidence in stories that they read. We always want our students to highlight these important parts, or the important, even in a math equation, in word problems. What is the important words that we need to know to figure out this word problem? Well, your students can highlight what they need to know and show you what they know just through highlighting and going over what different colors. Maybe they highlight in blue the most important things that they found as their evidence, and in yellow they highlight things, well, this is kind of important, I might need to know this for later. So this is awesome to highlight as evidence as they read and they go through. And I use it in my reading groups, and independently, my kids use it as well. And they highlight unfamiliar words. So when we're in reading groups in person, it's so easy to check in with students and help them with the words that may be unfamiliar to them. But if they're highlighting words as they go, where they're like, I kind of know that, but I may have mispronounced it. I don't really know if I'm doing this right. But Ms. Barella is busy online with another student right now, so I'm going to wait until it's my turn, and then I'm going to go back to that word. And so then my students are able to share their screens, and I can see which word they're highlighting. Or if you're in a Google Doc, you can see what they're highlighting if you give each kid a color. So let's say Bob has the color yellow and Sally has the color pink. Well, if you're seeing yellow being highlighted, oh, well, you can see that Bob is highlighting things as he is going through as well. So that's a pretty cool feature. So that way you can help your students a little more personally, even though we are virtual.
Yes. And again, I would almost guarantee it that as soon as you show this to your students, they will figure out how to use it. So don't worry about all the different tools and things to do. I would maybe start with the play tool, and use that. And then you can go through and learn that tool. And then maybe next, the highlighter will be the next one you want to learn. Next to the highlights, you do have the little broom. So if students accidentally highlighted achievements, they can click on the broom to make it go away, make that highlight go away. The next thing is the collecting of the highlights. So if I click on the collect button right here, you can tell it which colors you want to select and highlight, or which highlights you want to select. Press OK, and it's going to dump these into a Google Doc. Now, I've already accepted this once, but maybe there was an update. No big deal. I'm going to click on my name and allow. And now what it's doing is it's taking all of those highlights and putting them into a Google Doc. And the best part is it cites the source right here of where I got those highlights from. And it tells me whose account did that, which is mine. So very powerful tool that you can use as well, as especially with research and writing. So I want to point that out.
Yes, it's great for evidence when you're asking kids to find different facts and research about something. Well, when they're highlighting it and maybe you're not with them while they're researching, and they're like, well, this is a really great website I can use. At any age, they can use websites for research too. They highlight it and it dumps it into this document, so you know what their evidence or what facts they found that are most important to their project or their reading. And then you can always see it as well, as long as they share it with you, and they can always turn that in on Google Classroom as well.
Exactly. And someone in the chat mentioned Shelby Miller. She mentioned that it's a super helpful tool for building the vocabulary with your ESL students.
Yes.
So that's a great point too. Awesome. Okay. So that's the vocabulary highlighting tool. And let's see, go back here. All right. The next one that we're going to talk a little bit about is the practice reading aloud. And Cara, you want to talk about this and how you use it with your kids?
Yes. So just like the name suggests, the purpose of this tool is to allow students to practice reading any content out loud. This is so awesome, and I love this tool so much. And it's just to practice fluency, being able to read clearly, accurately, with appropriate expression. This allows your students to practice it on their own at home more than maybe in person. They're so used to practicing and reading with others, and at home maybe they don't get that opportunity as much. Well, this tool is so awesome to still allow them to work on their fluency. Or maybe those are maybe for the elementary students, they need to work on their fluency, but maybe for middle and high school, they need to work on practicing a speech. Maybe you're not with them to practice a speech and they want to show you it beforehand, but you don't have enough time. You're working with tons of groups, you're juggling all this stuff. Well, this tool is awesome for kids to even allow you to practice speech, fluency, any of those things. So I made a little thing on here. I put text on here of just a passage they may want to read. So once you highlight the passage, you're always going to have to highlight it first. So you're going to highlight it just like you would to get the practice reading aloud, because otherwise it doesn't know what you want to practice to read out loud. So that's a big thing. You always want to highlight whatever you want to read. You don't even have to highlight all of it. You can highlight maybe a sentence you want to practice. So you highlight it, and then you go to that little button that looks like a student reading a book, and you're going to click on practice reading aloud. And it's going to open it up for you. And you always want to allow the microphone so that way you can use your microphone to practice reading out loud. And you get those same tools. You have the dictionary, you have the hover text, you have the screen masking, the translator. So those are also the tools that they get to use in the other read and write toolbar, but now it's just practicing reading out loud. And the right-hand side, it even tells you click the record button to get started and click stop when you finish. And you use the play button to listen to how
record button to get.
So it can also read to you. That's a good thing that you did do that though, Kathleen, is it will read to you as well. So if you, maybe a student wants to know how to say something accurately or with fluency or with expression, well, it will read it out loud to you first, so you can kind of hear how it's supposed to be, and then you can have your turn to do it. So once you hit that microphone button, it'll record for you. It'll have you record what you say, and then you hit the stop button when you've finished recording. And then it'll let you re-listen to what you've said, just to say, well, did I mess up in this part? What can I do better? Or students always need to listen to maybe how they're saying things. So that way, when we're talking, we're saying these things, but they're like, did I say that right? Did I do that right? Is that how it's supposed to sound? So always double checking their work, re-listening to what they're saying. And this tool is awesome. So, and then they can, I'll talk about that in a second, getting so excited about it. Then they can send it to their teacher as well. So they use that little airplane button, and they can send it to you and share that with you so you can hear what they're using. So maybe you want to hear how they read a passage for reading. You're like, I want to listen to them read this, but we're running out of time. Well, they can use that and say it back to you and just send it to you, so that way you can still listen to them. Or even, like I said, when they're giving speeches or presentations, that's an awesome part. But when me and Kathleen were talking, we pointed out that a lot of times when kids are writing, they're writing and they're not double checking their work, and they're like, yeah, that sounds right. Well, if they were ever typing in a Google Doc, they're like, yeah, that sounds right. I don't need to double check if it sounds right. But sometimes in person, then we read it back to them, or we have them read it out loud, and they're like, oh man, that is not what I meant to say at all. That's not it. Oh no. Well, this tool is also helpful for them because it will read it to you. They can play around with it and see what they need to change and fix on it too, and talk back to you as well. They can just send you a voice recording. So maybe they're reading the passage out loud and they have to choose between which fits best in a sentence. So if they have 3 different options, which word would best fit? Well, they can say that word that they think is best fitting. And then that way you can grade it and sound and hear the sound that way too.
Awesome. So another really good tool for reading and using this virtually as with the other ones. So thank you for all
Yes, it's awesome for our struggling readers and our ESL and ELL that need to have that practice, and maybe they're not getting it virtually enough, and you're sitting there like, I know these kids need to do more, but what can I do for them? There's not enough hours in the day, because I know I'm that way all the time. Well, this tool is awesome to have them practice reading out loud for anything and sending it to you to even listen to and show their work.
Yeah, and I know a lot of teachers say, it's so hard to schedule. I think you mentioned, 20 minutes, there are 20 or 25 different kids and some don't show up. So this is a great way for them to read, and then they can send it to you for you to listen to. So thank you for sharing all of that. So the last thing, we've shared a lot of tools with you today, and you can go back. You have the power of pause. This will be up on our YouTube channel, and you can go back and listen to the different tools to see how you can use them with your kids. And the very last thing, and probably one of the most important, is the last slide of this presentation. There's a playlist on our YouTube channel, which Matt will probably play here in a little bit for you after we're finished. There's also a one-pager. So this one-pager is great to get you started with using Read and Write. It has the link to the form for you to use and tells you the different steps of what you need to do to get started. So for you and for your kids, there's a folder full of student support. So you could give that to your kiddos, but there's also parent support here as well. A folder full of resources for how parents can help their students. And then lastly, you have your teacher support folder. So inside the teacher support, there's several different resources about each of the tools. And one of my favorites is this one right here. It's a guide for all the tools. It shows you what they can do and how to access them. So just a real quick couple pages here for teachers, quick reference guide for you, because I know there are a lot of tools, and this earlier we did a presentation on the intro of how to use it. And then we brought Cara on today to give you some real examples of use in the classroom. So know that those resources are there for you. And if you have any questions about Read and Write, you can contact myself and I will do my best to help you with those. Thank you so
Oh, you cut out there for a sec, Kathleen. Oh, are you there?
Oh man.
Oh no. Well, at least she made it to the end.
Yes, we got it to the end all the way. Just finishing off what Kathleen was saying, like she was saying on her screen, you can contact us on Twitter, share your ideas out if you guys need any help using Read and Write. I know this resource, it's so much. It has so much to offer our students and even us during teaching, that even starting in the smallest way, like Kathleen had mentioned earlier, and then just maybe showing another thing that our students can use it for, it will help you and your students so much in the long run and by the end of all of this NTI virtual.
There she is.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. Sorry about that. It just completely.
Oh man.
We know how that Indiana internet goes. So, well, Cara, this was great. Thank you so much for being on this morning. We're so happy to have your brilliance here with us. And
That is so the Chrome keeps shutting down on my computer. Sorry about that. So anyways, thank you so much, Cara, for joining us today. We really appreciate it, and all of your valuable information and examples of how you've used it in the classroom. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad I could share these resources with other teachers who I know want to help their kids virtually, and even in person, these tools work for them.
Exactly. I didn't see any questions in the chat. I haven't checked in a moment since everything shut down on me.
I didn't either. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Well, again, we will get this up on the channel for you. And Matt's do you have the playlist? Matt's going to play the playlist for us. But thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, let's go ahead and get to our playlist here. Let me go over to Read and Write. Where are we? Read, Write. Sorry, it's taking me a second to get here. I wanted to show you the channel, and then if I switched over, we're just gonna have to look for it. Let's search by Read. Oh my gosh. Read and write. Here we go. Okay, so let's go ahead and play this playlist. Oh, I think I have it muted. Here we go.
Or just browsing the internet. Okay, let's start by seeing what we can do in Google Docs. Here's the purple Read and Write icon at the top of your screen. Click on it and this toolbar appears. First of all, let's read some text out loud. Put the cursor anywhere you want. Click play and it starts reading like this.
Honey is a kind of sugary syrup.
And you can stop at any time. Pick a word, like this, and use the dictionary to explain what it means. And there's a picture dictionary right here too. Click on the prediction icon, and Read and Write will help you by guessing words that you're typing. Put your mouse over the suggested word to hear it read aloud.
Insects.
If that's the word you're looking for, click to insert it. Click here near the right of the toolbar to change settings if you want to. There are lots of different reading voices to choose from. And you can change reading speed if it's too fast or slow. You can hide the toolbar anytime you don't need it by clicking on the Read and Write icon again. Okay, Read and Write isn't just for Google Docs. You can use it when you're browsing web pages with Google Chrome too. Click the Read and Write logo in the address bar, right here, and the toolbar pops up. Most features are pretty similar to when you're using Google Docs. With reading aloud, this time you can hover over to hear the text.
I had a chance to talk to the show's creator.
You can stop reading anytime. The dictionary lets you look up what words mean and hear the definitions read aloud. Double-click to highlight a word and press the dictionary button to see what it means. Click on the dictionary to listen to it.
Adjective, having life or vigor or spirit.
And of course, there's a picture dictionary too. Double-click to highlight a word, then click right here to see images related to the word you've selected. This fact finder is really useful if you're doing homework or researching an assignment. Highlight a word and click here to see search results from Google. Thanks for watching!
Okay, let's see if it goes straight to the next one, and I believe it will.
This video shows how Read and Write for Google Chrome can be used to read text aloud. To use text-to-speech in a Google Doc, just place your cursor where you want to start reading and click the play button.
Most of the energy we use today comes from fossil fuels such as gas, oil, and coal. However, these
Read and Write uses dual color highlighting, which helps improve comprehension. You can choose from a variety of voices by going to the Options menu and clicking on the Voices drop-down. If you're reading content in another language, you can even choose from a selection of international voices as well. You can also adjust the reading speed and turn continuous reading on or off. This controls whether Read and Write will only read the text you've selected or read through your whole document. To read text on the web, use hover speech to simply hover over some text with your cursor.
The unique geography of the Arctic leads to unique weather patterns that reappear in the region year after year. The map of sea level pressure for October 1st to 30.
You can also highlight a selection and click the play button. Keep in mind that if you encounter inaccessible text, you'll need to use the screenshot reader for that. You can also use text-to-speech in Google Slides, Google Forms, and more. To learn more about Read and Write for Google Chrome, visit texthelp.com. This video demonstrates how to use the translator feature in Read and Write for Google Chrome. The translator can be used to translate single words to over 90 different languages. To use in a Google Doc, select a word and click the translator icon on the Read and Write toolbar. For many languages, you can even read the translated word aloud.
Saludable. Salubre.
To change your translation language, just click the 3 dots on the Read and Write toolbar and go to Options. Translation works the same way in Google Slides
Inselgruppe.
and on the web. To learn more about Read and Write, visit texthelp.com. This video shows how to use the Check It feature in Read and Write for Google Chrome. Check It is a proofreading tool that will check for spelling, grammar, and homophone errors in Google Docs. To start using it, just click the Check It icon on the Read and Write toolbar. The errors in your doc will be underlined in purple. Just click on an error to see the suggested corrections, and then select the word you want to use, or hit Ignore. For spelling errors, you can also add to your personal dictionary. When Check It is on, it's constantly checking for errors in real time as you work. You can even use the dictionary, picture dictionary, or translator with Check It. Just hover over a suggestion to get additional context. In the Options menu, you can manage your personal dictionary. For more information on Read and Write, visit texthelp.com. This video shows how to use the Read and Write for Google Chrome PDF Reader with G Suite. To get started, right-click on a PDF in Google Drive and choose Open with Read and Write for Google Chrome. If you don't see this option, click on Connect More Apps and search for TextHelp PDF Reader to add it. Now you'll be prompted to install the PDF Reader extension. If your admin pushes out extensions for you, you might be able to skip these steps. Once you have a PDF open, you'll see the Read and Write toolbar at the top of your screen. To read some text aloud, use the Click to Speak tool.
In schools across the United States, physical education has been substantially reduced and in some cases completely eliminated
You can also select some text and use the play button. The dictionary tool provides definitions for selected words in your text. You can even hear them read aloud.
Adjective. To do with schools, universities or colleges,
The picture dictionary shows you images and symbols for selected words. The screenshot reader can be used to read inaccessible text in your PDF, such as images or text that has not been OCR'd. To use, just drag a box around any text and the screenshot reader will read it out loud.
the impact of schools on physical activity.
The translator tool gives you translations for individual vocabulary words and lets you hear them read aloud.
Ambientes.
The highlighters can be used for note-taking or research. You can even collect your highlights into a new doc in your Google Drive using the Collect Highlights button. You can also use the highlighters to create a vocabulary list from individual words in your PDF. The vocabulary list tool creates a new doc in your Google Drive with a vocabulary chart including definitions, images, and a blank column for notes or example sentences. The PDF reader also includes several annotation features, perfect for making notes, drawing, or filling out answers to an assignment. The typewriter annotation lets you type text on top of the PDF. You can use tools like Prediction and Talk and Type to help with typing. You can also adjust the font size and color. Once created, annotations can be dragged and repositioned on the page as needed. The pushpin annotation is ideal for making notes or adding instructions or helpful hints to an assignment.
Okay, I am going to go ahead and stop that video there for us. So, thank you for tuning in. It is 9:29. If you want to continue to watch those read and write videos, you can go to jcpsdigitallearning.com, which is where you are now. Go to playlists, and you can look for the read and write playlist on there. I believe that was the third or fourth video down in the list. Actually, that was the fifth video out of 9. So, thank you for tuning in. We're happy to have you here. Happy Wednesday. I'm sure it's an early morning for many of you. The election is still going on, so it's not even the morning after election because time has no meaning because it's 2020. So it's just a continuation of the weird, strange year that this is. But we're happy to have you today. If we take a look at our schedule, we just got done with Read and Write to support all students during distance learning with Kathleen Receiver and Cara Borella. Now we are going into accessing in-person and translation services with our JCPS Language Services Department. So ladies, I see you down there. Welcome. How are you today?
Hi, good morning, everybody. We are Language Services Department. My name is Jenny Merencio. I'm one of the bilingual facilitator of our office. The other presenter is going to be Gretel Gongora. She worked with us too. And in the chat is going to be our coordinator, Livan Lima. He is going to be answer any question that you have while we are presenting.
That's perfect.
So Gretel is going to start.
You're muted, Gretel.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, so I was saying that we're really happy to be here. Welcome to JCPS Language Services. We are excited for the opportunity to share information with you about our role in the organization. The purpose of JCPS Language Services is to obtain language support. We help the district communicate effectively with international parents in their native languages. Each month, our team facilitates hundreds of district interactions with JCPS international families. So the services that we facilitate are in-person interpretation, document translation, over-the-phone interpretation, and video remote interpretation. Language Services has a dedicated webpage to educate JCPS administrators and teachers about these services. Our webpage also allows them to request and receive the language support that they need in a timely manner and with minimal effort on their part. Our interpreters and translators are tested for proficiency in their working languages, and they are also properly trained and assessed for professional skills. So to let you know, you can contact us by either email to languageservices@jefferson.kyschools.us or phone to 502-485-6379 or 502-485-7938. Please keep watching to learn what you should do to ensure JCPS international families have equal access to education.
Okay, now we are going to start sharing our screen with you, and we are going to show you how you can find our page. So to find Language Services web page, we are going to open our preferred internet browser. Once you have there, you are going to type JCPS homepage on the search bar. So hit enter and follow the link to JCPS home. Okay, then we are going to type language services on the JCPS website search bar located in the top right corner of your screen. Okay, language services, hit enter. Okay, follow this link here and you are going to be redirected to our webpage. You don't have to memorize anything because we already have all our information really well organized here. So you just have to remember language services. This is our page, and we decided to use color tiles to present our information. There is one specific tile for each topic. On the left, you will find a tile for general information. So if you click here, you are going to see what we do, our sources of interpreters and translators, and our confidentiality statement. This is really important because you have to be sure that our interpreters are very well trained and assessed, so they are not going to share any information that they have in any meeting with the family. This tile here we created for parent informations. If you click here, and if you click this link, parents are going to have access to these videos here in many languages, and they have very useful information for them. A tile that we create where you can access our JCPS translation library. But we are going to talk a little more about this tile later. And a tile that we dedicate to our story. So here you can find our information. On the tiles on the right, you will find all services that language services facilitates. In-person interpreting, translation of documents, over-the-phone interpreting, and video remote interpreting. Also, you can find our content information in the top right corner of the web page. You can find our email there and our phones. And you will see our office location and additional information about JCPS international population. Okay. So, in this section here, you are going to see our one of our on-demand interpreting services. Okay, Gretel, ready?
All right. Okay. So now let's talk about our in-person interpreting service. You can access this service by just clicking on the tile. Language Services recommends the use of a face-to-face interpreter for lengthy appointments. When using an interpreter, we consider lengthy appointments to sessions that will last more than 30 minutes. If you are familiar with our services, simply click on this first link to submit your request for an in-person or face-to-face interpreter. Please remember that you can submit your request from any computer and or smart device. And also, as a reminder, we typically need a 3-day lead time to secure a face-to-face interpreter. Now let's go back. However, if this is the first time using our face-to-face service, we recommend you to read the first-time user information. In this section, you will learn how to obtain a login ID and a password to use our translator interpreter engagement system, TIE for short. So the only thing you need to do in order to obtain your login ID is to email us to this email and just put simply TIE requester in the subject. And we will take care of sending you the first email that will be a welcome email, and the second one with your credentials, that will be your username and a temporary password that you will reset and change it for the one that will be more comfortable for you. Also, if you have been using your service before and you forget your credentials, you can email us to this same email, and we will take care of sending you again your credentials so you can use our services. Okay, so also we have a short tutorial in the bottom to show you how to log in and create a desktop shortcut to make it easy for you to submit your request anytime you need it. Now let's go back to the previous screen. Okay, if you are not sure, let me just move this over here. We created 2 short tutorials to show you how to complete a request using Type. You can access them by clicking this link, and here you are, the 2 tutorials. We recommend you to watch them. Now let's go back. If you are not sure if our in-person interpreting service will be effective for what you are trying to accomplish, you can check our Learn More section by clicking this link. Here you will find important information, such as advantages of an in-person interpreting. For example, it helps detect body language and facial expressions, it is more personal, and it boosts effectiveness. Also, when it is effective to use. For example, interpretation sessions that will be very lengthy, more than 30 minutes, and interpretation sessions that will be enhanced with visual cues. Very important, you will find some tips for working effectively with an in-person interpreter. For instance, we want to point out that meetings will take longer when using an interpreter. You need to brief the interpreter, you need to speak directly to the student or parent, you need to pause every 1 or 2 sentences, just to mention a few. Very important, when we are talking, we don't use acronyms because sometimes the interpreter don't know what we are talking about. So we need to say the whole sentences and the whole word so they will understand better what we're talking about, okay? And they can do a better interpretation. Okay. Also, you will see some guidelines for requesting an in-person interpreting and how we process your request. Okay, now let's go back to the previous screen. Now Jenny will talk about translations. Let me just mute this.
Let's talk about JCPS Language Services video interpreting. Translation. Okay. Or no, we are gonna talk about video later. Let's talk about translation of documents. The tile in blue. JCPS Language Services facilitates translation of written communication, like, for example, district-wide documents and parent notes. Before submitting a translation request, JCPS Language Services recommends visiting the JCPS Translation Library and searching for documents used district-wide that have been already translated. If you are familiar with our services, simply click in this first link to request a translation via our translator interpreter engagement system, TIE for short. Please remember that you can submit your request from any computer or smart device. Something we want to add here is that our typical turnaround time is 3 work days. So after we approve the job, we have 3 days to have everything ready for you and share it with the requester. Okay, now let's go back to the previous screen. If this is the first time using our translation of document service, we recommend you to read the first time user information. You will learn how to obtain a login ID and password, Relov previously talked about it in the first presentation. And remember, if you use your if you are using Thai and you stop using like for 3 or 4 months and you forget your user ID or your password, you can email us and we are gonna send you an email with this information again. So don't worry if you don't remember this information, we can help you with that. You will find a very short tutorial on how to log in and to create desktop shortcut for streamlined access to Thai. Okay, now let's go back to the previous screen. Here, we create a short tutorial to show you how to complete a request using Thai. You can access it by clicking for assistance with completing your request. This video is a very good video and it's gonna help you in case that you have any question or you don't know how to submit the request. So, for more information about this service, you can check our Learn More section by clicking this link. Here you will find important information such as guidelines for requesting a document translation and how we process your request. Here, we would like to point out that our office prioritizes translation of documents that are used district-wide. When we receive a request, our team have a meeting and we decide which is the best answer for your request. Sometimes a teacher asks for a document but it's already translated and we just have to share the document with the requester. So let's talk about the translation library. This is a very useful tool. And here you will find JCPS documents and forms that are available in other languages. Once you click on this link, you will see different folders where the translations are saved for easy access. You can also do a search to try to find a specific document. Let's type, for example, parent place. You are gonna type parent place and you're gonna hit enter and you are gonna see that we can find that folder already created. Each folder have all the forms for you to print it. Our office normally identifies translation by adding a footer with the title of the document and the language. Once you find the translation, you are going to be able to save it, print it, and share it. In this case, for example, if you find the document but you want a language that are not there, you can ask to our office and we can add languages to this folder. All the translation in the JCPS library are completed by training and assessed translators.
Okay, so we just stop sharing right now, and concluding this, we will say thank you for watching. That we really appreciate your interest in learning more about the role of JCPS Language Services. And just to recap, JCPS Language Services obtains language support for district staff to build effective homeschool communication and promote meaningful family engagement in their students' relation. Our services are available to all JCPS families regardless of program affiliation. So, for example, they don't need to belong to the ESL program in order for us to help them. We will help all the families that speak a different language from English, a second language. International families can request language support by calling, sending a note, or visiting their schools. However, a JCPS employee always has to be in charge of accessing the actual service. Language support is an expense. Therefore, JCPS employees are responsible to manage the cost. So what we are saying is that whenever we need to communicate with an international family or parent, it depends on if they come to our school or we're calling them, we need to start the calling. We need to call. We cannot share any information with the parents because this service is to be started by a JCPS employee. We will be happy to answer specific questions via email to languageservices@jefferson.kyschool.us or via phone to 485-6379 or 485-7938. Please contact our office if you need help determining which communication method might be more effective for what you are trying to accomplish. And again, thank you for watching.
Jenny Gretel, thank you so much. That was great. So this video will be broken up. I'll break it up later this afternoon or early tomorrow, and then it'll be on the channel for everybody to come and watch at their own pace. So thank you.
You're welcome. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too. All right, everybody. It is 9:50. We have about 10 minutes until our next session starts, so let's go ahead and go back to the Digital Learning channel. Actually, before we do that, let's take a look at our schedule. So at 10 and 10:30, we have our Health Services Department coming on to talk about PPE basics and PPE for special needs staff. And then we're going to end today with the impact of secondary stress on educators. Don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter at JCPSDigIn. And when you tweet, use the hashtag JCPSDigIn. We can like it, we can retweet it, and we can continue to share your brilliance and the awesome things you and your coworkers and your students are doing with the rest of the district and the state. So, let's go ahead and go back to our Read Write playlist, and we're just going to continue to watch through some of these videos as we wait for our next session to begin. Here we go.
This video shows how to use the highlighters in Read and Write for Google Chrome to do research and extract key information from docs and websites. The highlighters on the Read and Write toolbar can be used on the web to identify key information as you're reading. To use, just select some text and click a highlighter button. Your highlights can be extracted into a new Google Doc using the Collect Highlights button. Just choose which colors you want to include and how to sort them, and click OK. This will automatically generate a new doc in your Google Drive containing your highlights, as well as a link back to the original source. You can also collect highlights the same way from a Google Doc. To learn more about Read and Write, visit texthelp.com. This video demonstrates how to use the vocabulary tool in Read and Write for Google Chrome. The vocab feature allows you to create a vocabulary list from individual words or terms. To use in a Google Doc, just use the colored highlighters to highlight individual vocabulary words. Then click the vocab button. This will automatically create a new doc in your Google Drive containing a vocabulary chart. It includes dictionary definitions, images from the picture dictionary, and an extra column for notes. This doc can now be easily customized for your individual use or even shared with students. The vocab tool also works the same way on websites. To learn more about Read and Write for Google Chrome, visit texthelp.com. This video shows how to use the dictionary and picture dictionary in Read and Write for Google Chrome. To use the dictionary, just highlight an individual word and click the dictionary button. Each definition can also be read aloud.
Noun. A machine that is powered by the wind. The electricity in our home is generated from a windmill.
The picture dictionary provides images and symbols to help with comprehension. To use, just highlight a word and click the picture dictionary button. You can even copy the images or just drag them right into your document. These features can be used the same way on the web, in Google Slides, and more. To learn more about Read and Write for Google Chrome, visit texthelp.com. This video shows how to use the Read and Write for Google Chrome PDF Reader with G Suite. To get started, right-click on a PDF in Google Drive and choose Open with Read and Write for Google Chrome. If you don't see this option, click on Connect More Apps and search for TextHelp PDF Reader to add it. Now you'll be prompted to install the PDF Reader extension. If your admin pushes out extensions for you, you might be able to skip these steps. Once you have a PDF open, you'll see the Read and Write toolbar at the top of your screen. To read some text aloud, use the Click to Speak tool.
In schools across the United States, physical education has been substantially reduced and in some cases completely eliminated
You can also select some text and use the play button. The dictionary tool provides definitions for selected words in your text. You can even hear them read aloud.
Adjective. To do with schools, universities or colleges. The
picture dictionary shows you images and symbols for selected words. The screenshot reader can be used to read inaccessible text in your PDF, such as images or text that has not been OCR'd. To use, just drag a box around any text and the screenshot reader will read it out loud.
The impact of schools on physical activity.
The translator tool gives you translations for individual vocabulary words and lets you hear them read aloud.
Ambientes.
The highlighters can be used for note-taking or research. You can even collect your highlights into a new doc in your Google Drive using the Collect Highlights button.
Morning.
Morning. We have a video playing right now. I'll be back in like 2 minutes.
You can also use the highlighters to create a vocabulary list from individual words in your PDF. The vocabulary list tool creates a new doc in your Google Drive with a vocabulary chart including definitions, images, and a blank column for notes or example sentences. The PDF reader also includes several annotation features, perfect for making notes, drawing, or filling out answers to an assignment. The typewriter annotation lets you type text on top of the PDF. You can use tools like Prediction and Talk and Type to help with typing. You can also adjust the font size and color. Once created, annotations can be dragged and repositioned on the page as needed. The pushpin annotation is ideal for making notes or adding instructions or helpful hints to an assignment. You can use Prediction or Talk and Type here as well. Review this part. The Freehand Draw tool lets you scribble or draw on your PDF. And the Shapes Drawing tool lets you create circles, rectangles, and lines with customized line and fill color. If you're collaborating in a PDF, you can make comments to leave feedback or notes for other collaborators.
Thanks for the feedback.
Along the bottom of your PDF, you have additional tools to rotate, zoom, search, and more. You can also print your PDF, including highlights and several types of annotations. In the Settings menu, you can customize speech, translation, and language settings. To learn more about the PDF Reader and Read and Write, visit texthelp.com.
Whew, okay. Gosh, I'm sneezy today. Hi, Eva, how are you?
I'm good. I am so sorry. I didn't know my speakers were turned down.
Oh, no,
I
you're
didn't
okay.
know that anybody was talking. I'm so sorry.
No, you're fine. We just had a video going. Our last session ended a few minutes early, so I had a few videos on the channel that we were just catching up on. So,
that makes me feel better.
yeah, let me do a short intro for you real quick, and then we'll get going.
Okay.
All right, everybody. It is 10 o'clock on the dot. We are so happy to be continuing on to our next session today. At 10 o'clock here, we're going to talk about PPE basics for COVID-19. So if you're tuning in the chat, please let us know where you're from. And if you have any questions, we'll be happy to answer them for you. All right, go ahead and take it away. It's all you.
Can you see my slides?
Not yet, no.
How about now?
Did you click on the 3 dots on the top right of the window up there?
Well, let me try that again.
Okay.
Well, let me find. There we go. Let's try now.
There we go. Yep, now we can see them.
Okay, perfect.
Do you mind to put on closed caption for us? Do you know how to do that?
Down here under captions,
Yep.
right?
Yeah, just make sure it's at the bottom. If you don't mind to turn the text size to large there.
Okay.
And then if you click, that hide button, perfect. And then you just need to click where it says CC, like right there.
Gotcha.
Yep, perfect. That's great. And then just hit allow at the top. Yep.
Gotcha.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, thanks everybody. Just want to talk about PPE, personal protective equipment, COVID-19, and coming back to school. Whenever that may be, it's not looking real promising right now with anytime soon anyway, with the rate of infection in Louisville, but at some point we will have to get kids back to school, and so I want to talk about personal protective equipment. The overall approach, of course, is to minimize the risk of infection through multiple mitigation measures. And I'm going to talk about that quite a bit, just from experience, from the things that we're seeing, and just from an overall perspective of prevention of transmission of illness. So I think we're all pretty familiar with COVID-19, the coronavirus. That's an illness caused by a virus. It can spread from person to person. It's spread mainly through respiratory droplets and short-range aerosols. That would happen, say, when an infected person talks loudly. It would project those droplets further when they cough, sneeze, or are real close to other people. Singing is another way those droplets are projected. Or by touching infected surfaces and objects and then touching your eyes, nose, or your mouth. So mitigation factors are the things that we do to try and prevent or decrease the risk of spread of the virus. And those include things like social distancing, cloth face coverings, policies, and personal protective equipment, screening and school exclusion, sanitation and environmental factors, and contact tracing. And these are actually the measures outlined in the document that school districts are to use when planning back to school, and that is from the Department of Education and Department for Public Health. So social distancing, 6 feet of social distance should be maintained at all times as much as possible. And this is one of the primary ways to prevent the spread of COVID-19. Social distancing is not personal protective equipment per se, but I think it's important that we discuss this because there is a misconception out there that if someone has a mask on, they don't have to be practicing social distancing. So when I talk about these things, I talk about this in a way that every measure that we take, they all work together. So the more measures that we can put into place, the more protection there is. And so people have the perception that if they have a mask on, that they don't need to maintain 6 feet of social distancing. And that's not correct. The objective, as much as possible, is to stay to have that buffer of space between yourself and other people. And again, that's as much as possible. We know that it's not possible at all times, but I do want to emphasize this because what in observations from situations when there are cases of COVID-19 in other places outside of JCPS even, a lot of times it's people think, well, we're all sitting in a room together, but we had masks on and say lunch. We all sat down. We were kind of spaced out, but not 6 feet apart. Then they take their masks down to eat, not thinking about what they're doing. And that is a risk of spread of the virus. So schools are working on plans that do include social distancing. And then, of course, staff will need to consider classroom needs. And as back to school plans are considered, these are some of the things that are being worked through on how to facilitate that. Cloth face coverings are expected for all students and staff unless they're eating or drinking or there's a medical waiver on file. There will be actually a way to note in Infinite Campus when a student has a medical waiver. And there are additional PPE needs for varying circumstances, which is what we'll talk about. So as far as screening and school exclusion, staff health checks should be completed each day. Students will have temperature checks when they arrive at school. Anyone who has a temperature greater than 100.4 will be excluded from school, but schools should have a plan to recheck if a temperature is elevated after the student has rested in a cooler environment. And just to tell a little story about that, these thermometers, these non-contact thermometers are surface thermometers. And so what that means is if somebody comes in from the cold or if somebody's been out in the hot sun, they will measure, or if they've been sitting in a car and the heat has been blasted on them, they may register a higher temperature than what they really have because this is not a core temperature, this is a surface temperature, which is why they need to be rechecked. We were screening for an event that was held at the district one day, and I had somebody come in out of the parking lot, and it was warm outside, checked his temperature, it was above 100.4. When he sat down for a couple of minutes and cooled down for a minute, then his temperature was normal. And again, that was registering the surface temperature. My dad is... he has kidney failure, and so he receives dialysis. And so earlier this week, he had dialysis. It was on Monday, and he was having pain at the site. And so he asked them at some point, asked him to stop and remove the needle. And when they did, they checked his temperature, and his temperature was elevated. It was above 100.4. And so they sent him to have COVID testing, but his COVID test was negative. His temperature was elevated because he was in pain, and that was causing him to sweat. And again, this wasn't a core temperature, it was a surface temperature. And also know with these thermometers, these surface thermometers, you have to be sure and look at the instructions because a lot of times they want the thermometer has to be acclimated to the environment that it's being used in. And so if you picked it up from inside and went outside and it was cold and it didn't have time to acclimate, then it may not give accurate readings. When somebody does have a fever, obviously, students or staff shouldn't attend school if they have a temperature above 100.4 or other COVID symptoms, but they can return to school or work when they're fever-free for 24 hours. Hand hygiene, hand washing, and use of hand sanitizer is very important. High-touch areas should have extra cleaning. No, with hand hygiene in the past in JCPS, hand sanitizer has not been allowed. There is a hand hygiene protocol now. Of course, soap and water should always be used if it's available. That's the first line defense, and it actually is very effective against this virus because the water breaks down. It's a fat, the lipid layer around the virus that water will break down, and so soap and water are very effective. But if it's not available, then hand sanitizer should be used according to directions. And then there are currently, again, high-touch areas should have extra cleaning. There's plans being worked out for schools related to cleaning and disinfecting. And then another piece of this work will be contact tracing. And when students or staff report a positive case of COVID-19, the JCPS contact tracing plan should be followed. And when you have the slides available, there's a link to that guidance document, which has been shared with schools and supervisors. So always we want to minimize the risk of exposure. And again, those things, just to emphasize, these are all things that we should be doing in addition to personal protective equipment as much as possible to help mitigate risks. And that's the social distancing, the face coverings, screening and school exclusion, sanitation, environmental factors, and contact tracing. So use of personal protective equipment. You want to use PPE, especially when the risk of exposure is higher. Nearly all students age 2 and older can wear cloth face coverings that securely cover the nose and mouth. Practicing and modeling of this will increase success. And then staff should use additional PPE for procedures that may increase their risk for exposure, which I'll talk a little bit more about. For social distancing, we want to space desks out as much as possible in classrooms. Note and mark areas where students may congregate because you want to make visual cues on the floor so people know this is where they should stand, which any of us who've been out to any type of grocery store or other stores, you've seen where they've marked the floors with visual cues to remind people how far apart to stand. And then schools will make plans for meals, and you want to make sure you have plans for recess. And schools have currently, at least all, have done an initial phase 1 of their back to school planning. So masks. The CDC recommends cloth face masks for general use. And that's all students and staff unless there's a medical waiver on file. Some people have medical conditions that don't allow for them to cover their mouth and their nose. And so those folks will bring a statement from their healthcare provider. There will be a form available to schools to have parents fill out. If schools have already received a form that's been filled out, just let the health services office know, and one of our nurse practitioners can get that transferred to a waiver form once those are available. You always want to wear masks with 2 or more layers. And so some of the gaiters that you can buy are very thin and don't have 2 layers. And so the guidance from the CDC is that the mask have 2 or more layers. The mask should be worn over your nose and mouth and secured under your chin. And then masks should not be worn by children younger than 2, people who have trouble breathing, or people who cannot remove a mask without assistance. So one more exception to that will be early childhood. Children, when they are napping, should not nap with a mask on. There's been guidance issued about that. And otherwise, kids should have their masks on. We don't generally want to be wearing masks that are intended for healthcare workers. For example, N95 respirators. Now, there's 2 different types of N95s. There's industrial grade and then there's hospital grade. So there will be instances in the district where N95 industrial grade respirators are available. Hospital grade respirators are still being diverted to hospitals because of their critical need for PPE. The Centers for Disease Control does not recommend the use of face shields alone. Evaluation of face shields is ongoing, but the effectiveness is unknown at this time. So this past weekend, my husband and I were at the grocery store and we saw a man wearing a face shield. You know, typically it wraps around the head and points down, and this gentleman had his on so that the bottom of it was actually coming up toward the top. It just looked to me like a funnel for germs to come right down toward his mouth. So you see a little bit of everything, but generally what the face shield is just that, it's a shield. It doesn't typically have anything at the bottom that wraps around. And so if somebody projects respiratory droplets, they'll go right up under a face shield and can go into the mouth and nose. Whereas if you have on a cloth face covering and then the face shield over top of that, that is a greater protection because that face shield's adding an extra layer, but it's not a real effective, at least the thinking is now, it's not a real effective standalone layer. Now, there would be people who have mask waivers that may wear a face shield, because again, it does afford some protection, but generally it's not recommended for use alone. And again, the evaluation of mask and gaiter materials and that structure is ongoing. So based on the CDC, don't choose masks. Do choose masks, that have 2 or more layers of washable, breathable fabric that completely cover your nose and your mouth and that fits snugly against the sides of your face and don't have gaps. But don't choose masks that are made of fabric that makes it hard to breathe, like vinyl, that have exhalation valves or vents, which allow virus particles to escape. So I've seen lots of people wearing the vented masks because they feel like it's easier to breathe. The problem with that is it's a vent that goes out into the atmosphere. And so, again, they're not recommended because you're still potentially projecting something infectious out into the atmosphere. And then, again, the masks that are intended for healthcare workers that include medical grade N95 masks. The gaiters and face shields, if you wear a gaiter, make sure it has 2 layers or fold it so that it makes 2 layers. And then the other picture is that of a face shield. And again, the evaluation is ongoing, but the effectiveness is unknown at this time for standalone face shield. Again, when you wear a cloth mask and then have a face shield over top of it, that's an extra layer of barrier protection. It's the same principle as plexiglass. You know, people want plexiglass. You see, when you go to the store, you see plexiglass in front of the cashiers. And the reason for that is to put a barrier between that person and the other person. And that's what a face shield would do. It's the same principle. So again, if you have a cloth mask on and you have a face shield, then that's an extra level of protection. Glasses. I can tell you from my own experience as well that when you put your mask on, the glasses fog up. So if you wear glasses, find a mask that fits closely over your nose or has a nose wire, which can help limit the fogging of your glasses. So again, wear a mask correctly and consistently for the best protection. The general rule is if you're moving, have a mask on. Now, so when we come back to school, the expectation is, and the guidance is, that masks are on at all times. The only exception is when you're eating or drinking. And so like right now, I'm sitting in my office and I'm sitting at my desk, my door's closed, nobody's anywhere close to me, I don't have a mask on. If I stand up and walk out of my office, then I put the mask on, even if nobody is here with me, because the principle is if you're moving, to wear a mask. Be sure you wash your hands before putting on a mask. And don't touch the mask when wearing it. So I see this all the time. I'm sure you do too, that people will have a mask on, but they're constantly touching their mask. And so again, that just increases the risk for exposure to something if there's germs all over the front of the mask. So how not to wear a mask. You can see all the pictures of how not to wear a mask. I'm going to tell you that if you look at the first picture on the bottom, the on your chin, that is how my parents tend to wear their masks, my elderly parents, despite how many times I tell them, you all, it really needs to be over your nose and mouth. Sometimes, and so I foresee that we will have similar conversations with people when we get people back together, but it doesn't do anybody any good if it's not covering the nose or the mouth. Or it could be like my dad. My dad takes his mask down when he wants to talk to people, and then he puts it back up, which again completely defeats the purpose of wearing a mask. So how to take off a mask. So putting on the mask, again, you wash your hands, put the mask on so that it covers your nose and mouth, put the loops behind your ears. Most of them are loop masks. Some of them will tie. To take off a mask, you will untie the strings behind your head or stretch the ear loops out. Handle by the ear loops or ties and not the whole front of it. Fold the outside corners together so that the inside is touching. And then if you're in your workspace and can lay it in your workspace, or just have it where you can access it again. And be careful not to touch your eyes, nose, and mouth when you're removing the mask. And then wash your hands, or if you don't have a sink, use hand sanitizer after taking it off. Masks should be washed regularly, the cloth masks. And of course, when we're back to school, disposable masks will also be available on site. So the cloth masks should be washed regularly. Remove masks correctly and wash your hands after handling or touching a used mask. Include your mask with your regular laundry. Use regular laundry detergent and the warmest appropriate water setting for the cloth used to make the mask. And then use the highest heat setting and leave it in the dryer until it's completely dry. For the sake of time, we won't watch the video, but there is an Ask a Nurse video on hand washing and reducing the spread of respiratory illness available on the JCPS site. The video was made in the spring. You'll see in the video, it shows how to perform hand washing and how to use hand sanitizer correctly. Remember, with hand sanitizers, they should be at least 60% alcohol based, and then they should be allowed to dry on the hands before you start doing other things. So that should be allowed to dry, that contact time. In the video, we do not turn off the faucet with a paper towel, which there have been some questions about. And the reason is the CDC does not just automatically recommend doing that, particularly in areas where they're very conscious about conserving water. But you just want to if you can use a paper towel to turn off a spigot on a faucet, or you can turn it off. Sometimes if I can use my elbow with the handle ones, I'll use my elbow. But anyway, that video is available. Other ways for self-protection, COVID is a respiratory virus, and it's mainly spread through droplets that are created when a person who is infected coughs, sneezes, or talks. And so, I do want to emphasize the fact that not everybody who has COVID-19 has symptoms. It's estimated even that up to 60% of people who might be infected with the virus don't have symptoms. Some things for us to consider about that when we come back to school, because obviously there is a lot of anxiety about the thoughts of bringing people back together. I have that anxiety myself. But COVID is not going to go away. It's not going to be we get a vaccine and then we're done with COVID. That's not how it's going to work. We're going to be dealing with this for years to come. And so just as a society, we're going to have to figure out how to function and how to protect ourselves and how to protect others from COVID in a way that is effective. And so the mask wearing, these measures are something that's going to be in place for some time. I really want to emphasize keeping socially distant from others when it's possible. When you don't have to be in crowds of people, don't be in crowds of people. The data that's coming in on schools at this point currently is that schools don't seem to be, at least at the elementary level, don't seem to be a big, there doesn't seem to be a big implication of schools in increasing the community spread. Right now, our incident rate in Jefferson County is over 40, which is very high. If you have followed the rubric that the state has developed about schools reopening, we're considered in the red zone, which is an incidence above 25. And so while that rate is above 25%, then face-to-face learning will not be recommended. And then in the discussion of coming back to school, options that the board will consider may include a hybrid model for middle and high school, so that not all students are brought back at the same time because of the ability to keep kids at least 6 feet apart from each other. Remember, again, washing your hands with soap and water for 20 seconds or using a hand sanitizer that's at least 60% alcohol often. At key times, I'm just going to tell you often, it's important that hand hygiene is important. And then practicing everyday preventive actions that we have been discussing. Things outside of, taking care in other settings where you find yourself. Now, just to say a few words about gloves. I see a lot of people when I go out to the store or go, which is really, the store is the primary place I go outside of here, and I see people wearing gloves. And what I want to caution everybody about, gloves are not needed outside of, for example, using a shopping cart or an ATM. That people wear gloves in a protective measure, but what they're doing when they put those gloves on, and then they touch other surfaces, and then they still may touch their face or their eyes. And so the gloves aren't protective to them in those kinds of situations. And so the best way to protect yourself from germs when running errands or after going out is to regularly wash your hands with soap and water for 20 seconds, or again, to use hand sanitizer that's at least 60% alcohol. So in the workplace, gloves are necessary if you're using a cleaning agent or in those situations where we typically would have worn gloves. But overall, they're not necessary. They're not necessarily something that's going to protect you from being exposed to a virus if you're just putting them on and then doing everyday things, because people tend to forget. They think I have gloves on, but then they still touch their face or the eyes, which is a way to be exposed to the virus. We talked about face shields again, but just a reminder, a face shield is an additional barrier. They're not proven to be effective at this point and not thought to be as effective in protection from the virus as a cloth face covering. They don't replace a cloth face covering unless there's a medical waiver on file. They can be used in addition to cloth face masks as an extra precaution. Face shields are reusable. They can be cleaned. And so again, an additional barrier that some people will feel more comfortable to have a cloth face covering on with a face shield than just a cloth face covering alone. Gowns are generally not indicated in a school setting unless there are procedures being performed where splashing may occur. So, and we will have those situations. We will have those classrooms where there's more of a risk for splashing or splattering, and that's when gowns would be indicated. And then the last thing I'll say, and then open it up for questions, is about ordering PPE. So PPE will be stocked in the central warehouse, and schools should follow standard ordering processes. Information has been communicated to clerks and to bookkeepers on how to order supplies that, again, will be available in the warehouse. And that'll include masks, gowns, gloves, clear masks for people who are maybe speech therapists or working with students who are hearing impaired, thermometers, face shields, shoe covers. We will stock some shoe covers. They shouldn't be generally indicated, but they're not something the CDC is recommending. CDC is not recommending standard use of gowns or gloves for a school setting. but there may be instances where they're indicated, and those are ordered and stocked and will be continue to be stocked in the warehouse. And so with that, I am glad to take questions. If anybody has any.
We actually did not have any questions in the chat for you.
Okay.
So, awesome presentation. Thank you. Are you doing the 10:30 presentation as well?
I am.
Are
yes.
You? All right.
So I may as well just hang here.
Yeah. If you want to get a drink for a second or take a breather, yeah, I'll go through some other things on here, and then we'll be good to go.
Okay.
All right, everybody. So that was our 10 o'clock session, PPE Basics for COVID-19. We will be right back with you at 10:30 for PPE and COVID-19 for special needs staff. And then we'll end our morning with the impact of secondary stress on educators. Remember, you can follow us on Twitter at JCPSDigIn and use the hashtag JCPSDigIn whenever you tweet the awesome things that you are doing in your classroom. That way we can see the greatness of you, your coworkers, your students. We can continue to spread that brilliance and love around the district and around the state. Don't forget, if you go to jcps.me/NTI, that will take you to our NTI 2.0 website. You can click on the teacher toolkit, and from there you can get the live virtual learning schedule. You can see that rather than Mondays, we are doing our shows on Wednesdays now until winter break. We also have our SAVIS trainings after school. So today is Wednesday, November 4th, and we have elementary science. Tomorrow we have middle school ELA, and then next week we'll continue with some of our middle school stuff. And then the week after that, Monday, November 16th through the 18th after school, we will have high school math, social studies, and science. So if you missed those SAVIS trainings because you had class or you had meetings, please make sure you catch up on those. Those are also posted on the channel for you, so you can go back and watch those with the power of pause. But in those afternoon sessions, we will have our science and our digital innovation partners in there, so that way you can ask them questions live while we're going through those videos. Finally, if you are on the JCPS Digital Learning channel, which is where you are now, make sure you hit that subscribe button. That way you can be notified when we go live, when we post new videos, so that way you can go back and watch with the power of pause. Eva, I think we're good to go for you now. It's 10:30, and our next session is going to be PPE Basics and COVID-19 for special needs staff. And I'm going to let you go ahead and take it away whenever you're ready.
All right. Let me see. I should have turned on closed captioning first, or is it still on?
You have to do it whenever you present, so you might just have to do it again after you share. Oh, sorry, I'm muted. You might just want to make sure it is on again after you share your screen. So.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, let me do that. Try this again. Oh, I should be doing. I'm not seeing the little icon.
Yeah. So you have to go to present mode in your presentation in order to get it there, because it's done through Google Slides.
Do it. Okay. Yep. There we go.
There you go. Perfect. Yep. And text size is already large.
Okay. All right. So to talk about PPE, COVID-19, and students with special needs. For those of you just joining, anytime we're talking about COVID-19, the overall approach is going to be to minimize the risk of infection while meeting the needs of children and youth with special care needs. So, as we know, COVID-19 is an illness that's caused by a virus that can spread from person to person. It's spread mainly through respiratory droplets and short-range aerosols when an infected person coughs, sneezes, or talks in close proximity to others, or touching infected surfaces or objects and then touching your eyes, nose, or mouth. But the primary mode of transmission is through these respiratory droplets. So when we talk about preventing COVID-19, we look at a number of measures or mitigation strategies to help reduce the risk of exposure. And when we talk about mitigation, we talk about lots of different factors that each one alone can help prevent. But when we do all of these things together as much as possible, then we greatly reduce the risk of transmission. And you'll hear it described sort of like a Swiss cheese model. So you have a piece of Swiss cheese and it has holes in different places, but when we stack it all on each other, then you don't necessarily, those holes in the Swiss cheese aren't necessarily as impactful. And this is what, when we talk about mitigation measures, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to minimize the risk of transmission. And so the ways that we have to do that at this point are through social distancing, through cloth face coverings, through policies and personal protective equipment, through screening and school exclusion, through sanitation and environmental factors, and then through contact tracing. Eventually, we hope that vaccine is added as a mitigation strategy. And I was in a meeting this morning that could come as soon as the middle of this month. But even when we get a vaccine, I think there's been a lot of thinking with this virus is, we're just buying time until they can cure it. And the reality is we're going to be dealing with COVID-19 for some time to come. And so in saying that, a vaccine will be something that also helps reduce the risk of transmission, but it's not going to be an automatic fix all at once. Vaccines immunize most of the population, but not all of the population. And so there's still a lot of measures that we're going to need to continue to have in place for some time to help reduce the risk of the spread of this virus. So social distancing, of course, is staying as far apart as we can. At least 6 feet is the recommendation, and it should be maintained at all times as much as possible. And this is one of the primary ways to prevent the spread of COVID-19. We talk to a lot of people through this office with questions about COVID-19 or who think they have been exposed to COVID-19 or who have been exposed to COVID-19. And we hear a theme pretty commonly that people think, if I have my mask on, then I don't need to work so hard to be 6 feet away from other people. And that's not correct. You still want to work as best you can to be 6 feet away from others, even when wearing a mask. Because again, we're looking at multiple layers of things that we want to do to help prevent spread. And when it comes to contact tracing, the current guidelines for contact tracing with the CDC are, if you had a mask on, but you were sitting close together, then they will still have people self-quarantine for 2 weeks. But if you had a mask on and were 6 feet, we're able to, at the workplace, you were 6 feet away from each other, then self-quarantine might not necessarily be indicated. And so as much as possible, we want people to be 6 feet apart. Schools are all working on plans that include social distancing, and schools have all done preliminary plans for back to school, and those are posted on the district website. And then staff will need to consider classroom needs, because it's going to be easier to be socially distanced in some classes versus others. And so everybody's room on an individual level should be assessed with an eye of, how can we spread people out as much as possible in the space that we have. So cloth face coverings are expected for all students and staff unless eating or drinking, or when there's a medical waiver on file. There are additional PPE needs for varying circumstances, and we will discuss those. Screening and school exclusion, staff health checks should be completed each day. Students will have health checks as well. They should have temperature checks when they arrive at school. Anyone with a temperature of, it should be greater than 100.4 will be excluded from school. And schools should have a plan to recheck if a temperature is elevated after a student has rested in a cooler environment. These are surface thermometers. These are not core thermometers. And so they're indications for use. We need to remember that they check a surface temperature. So, and this has actually happened in another district. If a kid the parent pulls up to drop them off in the morning, they've had the heat blasting in the car. a student gets the temperature check and their temperature reads above 100.4, really they should wait for 10 minutes and recheck again when they don't have all that hot stuff on or the hot air blowing on them, because these thermometers are checking a surface temp. And so they might register low, they might register high. Also, if you are responsible for checking temperatures, just be sure that you've looked at the package insert for the thermometer, because most of them have to be acclimated to the room where they're being used or outside for a period of time before you start using them. Students should not attend school with a fever or other COVID symptoms, but they can come back to school when they're fever-free for 24 hours. Sanitation and environmental factors, hand hygiene, hand washing, and the use of hand sanitizer is very important. High-touch areas should have extra cleaning, and plans are being worked out for schools related to cleaning and disinfecting. When students or staff report a positive case of COVID-19, the JCPS contact tracing plan should be followed. Basically, that plan, this is a link. When you can access the slides, that gives the guidance for contact tracing in JCPS. There's a reportable disease form that needs to be filled out. The law says that if someone has a condition that can be transmitted in a school setting, by law, it has to be reported to the health department. And so this form that people will fill out, this communicable disease form, gives us the information that's needed to report this case to the health department. When we also are required to report contacts of cases to the health department, but those are for only people who are physically working on site, not for those kids who are currently staff who are working remotely or students who are doing NTI. That will change when we're face-to-face. We'll have to report contacts of people who are physically present in the building as well. So to kind of re-summarize that, if somebody is positive for COVID, or if you know of a student that's positive for COVID, they share that with the school, then that has to be reported through this contact tracing plan. There's a link on that form that tells you what to do. We have to report that to the health department. We actually have to report cases and contacts every day to the health department, and then we have to report numbers of cases and contacts every day to the Department of Education. And then we do things to minimize environmental exposure risks. So social distancing, cloth face coverings, these things that we've already talked about, but I really want to emphasize that there's multiple things that we need to do, each of these things to the best of our ability, because they all work together to help prevent spread of this illness. So I'm going to talk about PPE in particular circumstances specifically, but I really want to emphasize that every one of these measures we need to follow to the best of our ability to help prevent transmission. So we use PPE, or personal protective equipment, especially when the risk of exposure is higher. Nearly all students age 2 and older can wear a cloth face covering that securely covers the nose and mouth, and that actually is from the American Academy of Pediatrics and the Centers for Disease Control. Now, exceptions to that will be those who have a medical waiver to wear a mask, and we will have some of those. Also, we don't want our children in early childhood napping with masks on. That the American Academy of Pediatrics says they should not nap with masks on. And early childhood has made a plan to have those children, their cots will be laid out so that they're sleeping head to the foot of the next person. Practicing and modeling will increase success, and staff should use additional PPE for procedures that may increase their risk for exposure. And that's what I'll spend the rest of the time talking about. So, kids with asthma. PPE needs for staff when you're working with a student that has asthma is, again, all are expected, a mask is expected at all times unless there's an exemption on file. Mask and gloves if the staff member is assisting with administering the student's inhaler and the student can stand more than 6 feet away from others, and that includes staff. So if you're a staff person that's helping a child to use inhaler, then you would use a mask and gloves if you're able to be 6 feet away from the child. If a mask, gloves, and a face shield's indicated if the staff member is directly helping the student with the inhaler and will be in close contact with the student during the procedure. And then mask, gloves, and eye protection if administering a nebulizer. And a face shield will function as eye protection because it does cover the eyes. And sometimes people will wear goggles underneath a face shield in other settings, typically not with us. But I do want to say there's a difference between an inhaler, which is a little canister, and a nebulizer, which is a treatment where there's actually a compressor that's plugged in. As much as possible, we're discouraging the use of nebulizers in schools because it aerosolizes, it produces more aerosol than an inhaler would. But there are instances where children need to use nebulizers, and so additional PPE is warranted if that's the case. When the student self-administers the inhalers, they should stand 6 feet or greater away from other people. Inhalers that are stored in the nurses or health office or classroom should be kept in bags, in paper bags if possible. And then stock albuterol inhalers, which we will be implementing this year in JCPS. We will have albuterol inhalers canisters available in the schools. They should be cleaned after each use per package instructions. Students should only use a nebulizer, like I said, when it's medically necessary. If a student must use a nebulizer, then only the student and one staff member should be in the room. The staff member needs to wear gloves, a mask, and eye protection, and that mask should be a surgical mask or medical mask. And eye protection, again, that can be the face shield. After the nebulizer treatment's administered, the room will need to be cleaned. Nebulizer parts should be cleaned with dish soap and water and allowed to air dry. And if a student with asthma can't wear a mask for medical reasons, they will need to have a waiver from their healthcare provider. And the district will have a waiver form that families can use. If a family has already gotten a statement from a healthcare provider, then just contact health services and we'll take care of helping to get that transferred to a waiver form. So students with autism. Staff need, again, the cloth mask at all times, and then the student should wear a mask if they're able to do so. The student does not need to wear gloves. For cerebral palsy, the mask, cloth mask for staff and the student. If the student's in a wheelchair and requires position changes and staff are assisting with that, then they should wear a mask, which would be a more, not just a cloth mask, a surgical or medical mask, gloves, and a face shield when they're up against that student to help with positioning. Again, the student should only wear a mask if they're able to, and the student does not need to wear gloves. So students with diabetes, a mask is expected, again, at all times, unless there's a medical waiver. You know, early on in the guidance document, the state had said that children younger than first grade, so early childhood and kindergartners did not need to wear a mask. They changed their stance on that. And so now the expectation is that in JCPS, all students will wear a mask unless they have a medical waiver on file, an exemption. If staff are performing blood sugar checks or giving insulin, for our students with diabetes, then they should wear a mask, gloves, and a face shield for the procedure. And then remember, students may need a private area to check their blood sugar levels and give insulin. If the student's comfortable with doing this in the classroom, then an area should be provided. The nurse or designated staff may need to meet. The nurse may need to meet, with the trained staff somewhere other than the health office in order to avoid exposure to ill students. So, in other words, if kids with diabetes typically have been coming up to the office, but that's what your school has designated for where the sick kids are going to go, then something else may need to be arranged for that student with diabetes. For children who are immunocompromised, Again, a mask or their immune system isn't fully functioning. A mask is expected at all times unless they are have a medical exemption on file. And there may be times when students can't attend in-person school because they're immunocompromised and they have a healthcare provider statement. Accommodations should be made to allow instruction at home. If that's what the ARC or the 504 committee all agrees on, and the medical provider and the parent wants that to happen, these students may wear N95 masks to school if they're instructed to by their healthcare provider. So just know those kids the provider and the parent may work out that they prefer that child learn at school but have some other accommodations. So as far as lungs and respiratory disorders, staff should wear, again, when you're doing respiratory procedures, gloves, a mask, gloves, gown, and face shields when up close to a student. If suctioning a student, they should wear a mask, and that would be an N95 mask, gloves, gowns, and eye protection, again, during suctioning, because suctioning is aerosolizing a procedure. Some kids have closed suctioning systems, and that would be a lower risk than an open system. Suctioning should be done away from the other students and the staff, the area. Let me try that again. Suctioning should be done away from other students and staff, and after the procedure, the area should be cleaned. And if the student has a nurse assigned, a space should be available in the classroom and on the bus for the nurse. Okay, migraine headaches. So for staff, again, cloth face mask. Students may have an accommodation in an IEP or 504 plan that allows them to rest when they're having a migraine headache. This area should be provided somewhere other than the health office or the office that's designated for sick students. So you don't want to have the child who's having issues with a migraine to lay down in the same isolation area where a student who is sick may be waiting for somebody to come and pick them up. Okay, kids with seizure disorders. The personal protective equipment for staff will include a mask, gloves, and a face shield if they're in close proximity and the student is having a seizure. And again, other considerations, if a child is having a seizure, other students should be cleared from the room to provide for privacy. And what the face shield does, I've mentioned several times to wear the mask and then put a face shield on with that. The face shield is an extra barrier, and face shields will be, staff will be issued face shields when students return to in-person learning. And so what the face shield does is just an extra layer of protection. It's a barrier. It's the same principle as plexiglass. So when you go to the store and you're in the checkout line and there's plexiglass that plexiglass is there as a barrier between you and the cashier. And the face shield will provide the same purpose. So face shields should never be worn alone. They are for use with a cloth face mask or even with an N95 mask. There may be situations where somebody has a medical exemption. They can't wear a mask that covers their nose and mouth, but they may be able to wear a face shield. But again, there's research still being done about face shields, but the guidelines say that a face shield should not be worn alone. So when you are doing things with students that require you to be up close to them, then it's always a good idea to put on that extra layer of protection, because again, we're taking all these measures, and the more layers we can add to that, then we're adding another layer of protection. And so face shields are good anytime that you're going to be in close proximity to a student, whether they're having a seizure or whether that they're having some other medical need that is requiring you to be right up there with them. Sickle cell. So we have a lot of students in the district that have sickle cell anemia, and again, same mask, cloth face mask, and then kids with sickle cell may have accommodations to rest, and this should be done in a space other than the health office because, again, we don't want to expose kids who may have something going on with one health condition to a child that's potentially sick with something else. It's also real important to remember that children with sickle cell anemia, anytime they have a fever, that can cause a sickle cell crisis, and so the parent or guardian needs to be notified immediately in that case. Spina bifida, again, cloth mask expected at all times. If the student's in a wheelchair and is going to need help with position changes, then the staff should wear a mask, gloves, and a face shield. The student should only wear a mask if they can. Student does not need to wear gloves. So to talk a little bit about procedures. When children are catheterized or need assistance with hygiene, staff should wear a mask, and that can be a surgical mask. They should wear gloves, and they should wear a face shield. Again, anytime you're going to be up close to a student, those things are indicated. Gowns may be used depending on the circumstances. So gowns are indicated when performing procedures that there's a reasonable risk for splashing or splattering. And so that may or may not be the case when supporting a child with hygiene or catheterization, but it may be at times. And so gowns will be available. Students should only wear masks, should wear a mask if they're able to do so. They do not need to wear gloves. So toileting assistance and diapering, staff should again wear up close. So you're going to wear a mask, gloves, and a face shield. When doing the procedure, gowns would be recommended if there's a reasonable expectation that saliva or other body fluids could be come into contact with clothing. And then kids, mask if they can, no need to wear gloves. Feeding assistance, same principle. Gloves, mask, face shields when completing the task. So kids who need tube feedings or you're feeding a child a meal, that's what you should wear. When staff are working with students who are likely to bite, spit, and the such, then they should consider wearing long sleeves or a gown or a jacket to cover clothing. And the same principle with students. Students should wear masks. If they're able to do so, no need to wear gloves. G-tubes and medications or feedings, exactly the same thing as I said. The PPE for the staff, and then staff working with kids likely to bite or spit, then you want to wear some sort of covering over your clothing. Gowns have been ordered and are available. Some people wear smocks or those kinds of things available to wear over clothing. Okay, so when providing hand-over-hand assistance with tasks, staff should have on mask, gloves, face shield. You're up close to a student, you should have on those kinds of protections. When you wear gloves, again, just have them on when you're taking care of that particular student's needs. When you take them off, you want to wash your hands thoroughly. And the same principles. If a child's likely to bite or spit, then you want to also wear a gown over your clothing. Gowns have been ordered, reusable gowns, long sleeve gowns that can go over clothes for these kinds of situations. And then students should wear masks if they can and do not need to wear gloves. So occupational therapy, therapists should wear the same up close and personal PPE as we've been discussing, and then make sure each student has student specific adapted tools and devices, and those items are routinely cleaned per protocol. Other considerations, consider assessing students in a group with other providers. If traveling to multiple schools, try to adjust your schedule to only go to one school per day as much as possible. We know that that's not always feasible in JCPS, but we want to limit travel as much as we can to between buildings, especially for the point of contact tracing. If you're a provider that's going between schools, you should sign in at each school so that they know that you're there, but we don't want anybody missed if there's a case and contact tracing needs to be performed. And then if you have to see kids in small groups, you want to have them 6 feet apart as much as possible, but you want to try and keep those groups consistent, and then keep a seating chart, have them have assigned spots so that you know where they are. And again, if contact tracing needs to take place, then we need to be able to do that. Same principles for physical therapy and speech therapy. Speech therapists, there will be in the warehouse, again, masks that have the clear screens. It's maybe possible to use a plexiglass screen between the therapist and students, but a face shield worn over a mask can provide similar protection. So, the first thing to try is wearing a mask with a face shield to see if that is effective. Then if there's other issues, plexiglass can be looked at. There are portable plexiglass dividers, but I'm going to tell you the guidelines from the State Department of Education and Public Health say that plexiglass can only be used routinely in a school in the front office area or the cafeteria line where kids check out. If plexiglass is used in other settings in the school, it has to be secured, it has to be pre-approved by the health department, and it has to meet fire marshal inspections as well. So it's not just as easy as saying, I'm going to put plexiglass up in these places. It has to go through a series of approvals per the state guidelines. Clean the areas between students, and then again, same principle if traveling to multiple schools in a day. Try and minimize travel, try and keep your groups consistent. And then finally, just some special considerations. We talked a little bit about biting and spitting. Additional personal protective equipment is needed in those cases. Mask, face shield, gloves, and gowns if kids are likely to bite or spit. And again, same principles, wear a gown if there's reasonable expectation of body fluid coming into contact with your clothing. And then finally, PPE is stocked in the central warehouse. There's been lots of it ordered. There's a process when triggers are hit for supplies in the warehouse that more will be brought in. Schools should follow their standard ordering processes. Bookkeepers have that information, or other people who might do ordering at your school sites. And then these things have already been ordered and are being stocked at the warehouse. And with that, there's about 2 minutes left if anybody has any questions.
No, again, I didn't see any questions in the chat. Super informative. Thank you for being here to talk us through COVID protocols and PPE and everything. It's just, my mind is just boggled at what it would be like going back into like in-person classes. I can't imagine. So
we are learning new things every day, aren't we?
Yes, we are. Well, again, these videos will be broken up. I think I'm actually the person running the stream this afternoon, so they'll be broken up tomorrow morning. But they'll be there for you to take the links if you want and to send out to other people as you choose. So.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I appreciate it. All right, everybody, it is 10:59. Let's go ahead and take a look at our schedule before we get started. We just finished up with health services and our PPE and COVID-19 for special needs staff session. We are about to go into our 11 a.m. session with Sarah Fangman and the impact of secondary stress on educators. Don't forget, you can find that virtual learning schedule if you go to jcps.me/NTI, click on the teacher toolkit, and go to the live virtual learning schedule. While you're surfing around on the internet for some JCPS wonderfulness, don't forget you can follow us on Twitter at JCPSDigIn, and then tweet to the hashtag JCPSDigIn whenever you are doing awesome things with your coworkers, your students, or whatever. That way we can give you some love and some retweets so we can continue to share your brilliance. Also, don't forget, after school the next couple weeks, starting at 4 o'clock and going until around 5:30, we will have our SAVIS trainings broken up by grade level and content area. So today, at 4 o'clock, we will have our elementary science SAVIS session going. Tomorrow will be middle school ELA. And then next week, we'll move into our middle school social studies science and then into high school. So make sure you turn in for those of you who missed those SAVIS sessions, but those are also going to be, they are actually on the JCPS Digital Learning channel so you can watch those at your own leisure. But we will have people live in the chat tonight to answer your questions if you need to. Sarah, welcome. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Good. Well, thank you. Whoops, I'm muted. Good. Thank you for being here. It is 11:01, and it is all you. Take us away.
Alrighty. So, do I just present?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Do my present mode. Alrighty. Am I good? Can you see?
Not yet.
Well.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you? You have to share your screen on the Google Hangouts. I'm so sorry. There should be 3 dots at the top of our call window here. If you click on that and then go to share screen. Yep.
Excellent.
There you go.
Okay.
And then you can go back to that presentation. And then while you're there, if you don't mind to hit that hide button right there. That your cursor's right there. Yep. Hide. And then when you go to your presentation, and if you go to present mode.
Yep.
Will you click on the CC button in that bottom bar right there to turn on those closed captions?
Okay.
And just hit allow at the top right there. That's perfect. Thank you.
Alrighty, so here we go. All right, so the topic that I'm presenting on today is the impact of secondary traumatic stress, or STS, on educators. We will jump right in. My background. My name is Sarah Fangman. I am the professional school counselor at Hazelwood Elementary. I have been the counselor there for 4 years. I have worked in education in various roles, stemming from being a kindergarten instructional assistant, an ECE teacher, an interventionist, and now as the school counselor for 10 years. So our question today is, why focus on secondary traumatic stress, or STS? My student support team and I are focusing on self-care as part of the 4-phase re-engagement plan for our staff at Hazelwood. And during that planning meeting, we discussed the topic of secondary traumatic stress and how it affects educators. So this began my research and supported our emphasis on the importance of self-care for educators who work with students who have been affected by trauma. Our objectives today are to define secondary traumatic stress, discuss who is at risk, outline the factors that contribute to risk, examine the effects of STS on educators, consider preventative strategies, including personal prevention and coping at work, and discuss interventions when you recognize STS and self-care. So, what is secondary traumatic stress? Secondary traumatic stress is the emotional duress that results when an individual hears about the firsthand trauma experiences of another. So the essential act of listening to these trauma stories may take an emotional toll that compromises professional functioning and diminishes quality of life. This secondary traumatic stress, the term secondary traumatic stress, is used interchangeably with compassion fatigue, excuse me. Let me turn off my, I apologize. Alrighty. So who is at risk? There is little research about the effect of secondary traumatic stress on educators. The development of secondary traumatic stress is recognized as a common occupational hazard for professionals working with traumatized children. Any professional who works directly with traumatized children and is in a position to hear the recounting of those traumatic experiences is at risk for secondary traumatic stress. So Hazelwood, for example, is a Title I school. We have about 45% of our population who are English language learners. Included in that population, we have refugees, we have students who, across grade levels and different cultural backgrounds, have experienced a lot of traumatic events. And I know that that is also the case for most teachers or most educators or staff members who work with students in our schools. At Hazelwood last year, we participated in trauma-informed care training, which is also something that I suggest for those of you that have not participated in it. It is exceptional. It really gives you an in-depth look at what we can do as educators to help serve our our students who have been exposed to trauma. All educators and staff, coming from, our custodial staff, if they work the door whenever kiddos come in to your school in the morning, to cafeteria workers, to the counselor like me, to teachers, to the Family Resource Center coordinator. We all hear about traumatic events from students at one point or another. It might just be something that they pop in and say, hey, this happened to me. So it is not limited to teachers or counselors. It can be anyone who works in a school. It is possible for you as an educator to experience this secondary traumatic stress if you're hearing about these repeated events that a kiddo has experienced, or if you have several, like for a classroom teacher, you have 20 to 30 students in your classroom. So you could be hearing events from multiple children. And so, it is definitely something that if it is repeated, that we are at risk for. So that is why I found it so interesting and very important for us to learn more about this topic. So the factors that contribute to risk, there are 3 factors that I have learned about. Your student population. So if your school or your place of work has students who are in special education, and we all know that every school has students that are in special education, you have a higher risk of being exposed and having the secondary traumatic stress. Students living in high poverty, students with parents with drug or alcohol dependency, LGBTQ youth, immigrants, or if you have students who have lived through a crisis, a hurricane, terrorist attack, suicide of a peer, or et cetera. Your personal characteristics could contribute to your risk. So your awareness of secondary traumatic stress symptoms and causes, our natural and acquired ability to deal with stress is also a factor that can contribute to your risk. The degree to which we empathize with students' circumstances. And I know as a school counselor, it is just in my nature that I am an empathetic person. And so I feel what my students are feeling. And I know that teachers and other staff that work with students are also in that same boat. And then another personal characteristic is your own personal history of trauma. The last factor that contributes to the risk is your school environment. So if your school encourages teachers to attend to self-care, provide support to engage in self-care, acknowledges challenges of teaching trauma-exposed youth, and that is where that trauma-informed care comes in and why that is so important. And if your school environment fosters open communication, those are all factors that can contribute to your risk of secondary traumatic stress. So the effects of secondary traumatic stress on educators. So like I mentioned earlier, there is very little research on the effects of secondary traumatic stress on educators. This is why I kind of delved deeper into this topic and why I will continue my research on this topic just to find out more and how we can help other educators and other people that work in a school. So the effects of STS on educators, you might have intrusive thoughts or re-experiencing of the event, like nightmares or flashbacks, so that empathizing, feeling what our students have gone through. Feeling on edge and waiting for something bad to happen, like you can't concentrate, you're more irritable or angry. You could experience avoidance of memories, feelings, or people associated with your students' traumatic events. And then you could also have negative changes in how you think or feel. So again, going back into that difficulty concentrating or feeling confused, guilty, or sad about what happened to the student, a more negative viewpoint of yourself or the world, the guilty, hopeless, angry, or cynical feelings, problems sleeping, feeling disconnected from others, and a diminished sensitivity to violence. What I have heard from others is if you are repeatedly told or you're exposed to students who have experienced this trauma, or you have issues or incidences that occur within your building, sometimes we feel desensitized to how significant or severe those events are. Chronic exhaustion, loss of creativity or irritability, social isolation, poor self-care, and avoidance of listening to students because you are afraid of what they might share. So if you've experienced an interaction with a student where they have disclosed something that's extremely traumatic, you might avoid listening to that student or other students again because you're afraid that they are going to share something similar to that. And then arousal and hypervigilance. So I looked into, these are terms that we hear a lot, but I wanted, for my own personal knowledge, I hear arousal and hypervigilance a lot. However, I wanted to look at what the definition of that was. And it's increased alertness and sensitivity to your environment. So you have an over alert awareness of what things are happening around you, and the dangers of things that are happening around you. And most of the time, based on this definition, the dangers are not real. So you're really being impacted by that traumatic event that you were told about. So prevention strategies, self-monitoring is something that's very important, but it is imperative with secondary traumatic stress that we use self-monitoring. So we're looking for, if we're feeling very irritable, if you're feeling like you are isolating yourself, if you're very cynical, if you avoid work activities, if you feel fatigued, or if you are detaching. So a main question is, how do we know when we are being affected by this work in ways that are harming us? So when we are triggered by trauma cues, we are at high risk for overreacting to a situation that we may not have had an extreme reaction to before, experiencing strong feelings as intolerable. So we are having extreme feelings and they're something that we cannot deal with at that moment in time. Numbing or shutting down, or feeling hopeless and overwhelmed. Often we do not have the opportunity to process what we are experiencing. So a prevention strategy for secondary traumatic stress is to find a buddy, a supervisor, a colleague, a therapist to talk and reflect with, or to take some alone time to reflect on the feelings that you are having. Personal prevention and coping at work. So according to the National Child Traumatic Stress Network, which is one of the references that I really dug deep into, personal prevention would be to maintain adequate self-care. And I know that this is something that we harp on a lot. It's suggested that we practice self-care. But I am guilty. I'm a person who, I know that we all need to practice self-care, but it's hard sometimes, and it's hard to make time in your schedule to do those things. But it's even more important now that I know about this secondary traumatic stress, and especially because we're in this virtual world that is different for us, and it is causing a lot more stress on us in this role. So, personal prevention, maintaining adequate self-care, is to know and honor your own personal limitations. Exercise compassion for yourself. In our role as educators, we exercise extreme compassion for everyone, for others, for other teachers, for students, for the people around us. But we need to exercise that same compassion for ourselves. And then learn how to say no. This is something that's really difficult, I know, personally, but it's very important to know your limitations and to know whenever you cannot do anymore. The next one is to maintain appropriate boundaries with students. Stay emotionally connected without becoming overly involved. So it is very important that our students know that we care about them, that we're connected to their stories, but without becoming overly involved. And I realize that is it's a very thin line. One moment. However, we have to realize and recognize whose needs am I meeting? We have to think about ourselves. So, the last one is to leave work at work. again, that is something that during our virtual learning world, it is very difficult because we are working from home. So maintaining that balance and drawing the line between work and home. Another prevention strategy is coping at work, taking breaks, seeking support from others, and learning relaxation techniques to incorporate into your routine. I have stars at the bottom. This is very important. Proper rest, nutrition, exercise, and stress reduction activities are also very important in preventing secondary traumatic stress. So just taking care of yourself. So if you recognize that you are experiencing secondary traumatic stress, some interventions that you can put into place, like I mentioned earlier, maintaining an appropriate work and life balance, leaving work at work, and just making sure that you are dedicating a set amount of time to work activities, and then whenever work is finished, that you do other things. So activities that rejuvenate you and heal you. Attending to spiritual needs, if that is something that you believe in. Discuss your experiences with a supervisor or colleague. So recognizing that other people are feeling the same way, and using that as like a sounding board to talk with other people about how they're experiencing these feelings, and they might have suggestions as well. Obviously seek therapy if needed, and then this is something also that I think is very important, but taking a mental health and wellness day. This is something a lot of us just leave our personal days in the bank, but it is important that we take those mental health and wellness days. Just take a day for yourself if you are feeling and recognizing that you have these secondary traumatic stress symptoms. There is a website, Support for Teachers Affected by Trauma. The acronym is STAT. They have a website. There is a free training. It is amazing. It is 5 modules. It does take some time, but there are 5 modules that are free, and it goes in depth into the effects of secondary traumatic stress on educators. So it gives you the opportunity to take a self-assessment questionnaire if you recognize those feelings of secondary traumatic stress. In my presentation, I have a link. The underlined word link will take you to the website, Support for Teachers Affected by Trauma, the STAT website, and it will take you straight to that training page. I do highly suggest that you take the time to go to this website. It's very valuable information. So the last part of this presentation is self-care, and I didn't want to focus the whole presentation on self-care, although it is very important, but the information that I've provided to you on secondary traumatic stress and how it affects educators just really drives home the importance of self-care. So this was new to me. I've heard the term self-care, but I have never seen it broken down as into these 3 basic concepts. So awareness, balance, and connection. So the first step is to seek awareness. So this requires us to slow down, focus inwardly, and determine how we are feeling, what our stress level is, what kinds of thoughts are going through our heads, and if those thoughts and actions are consistent with who we want to be. So more than likely, if you are someone who is experiencing these effects of secondary traumatic stress, or you have had a stressful day and you have heard the recounting of a traumatic event from a student or a family, that awareness piece is going to be very important, because more than likely you are in a state at that point in time that you do not want to be in. So the second step is to seek balance. So we're seeking balance in all areas of our lives, including work, personal, family life, rest, and leisure. We know that we will be more productive people if we've had that opportunity to rest and relax. But this also goes into becoming more aware of when you are losing that balance in your life, and giving us that opportunity to change. And then the final step is connection, and that involves building connections and supportive relationships with coworkers, students, friends, family, and community. So one of the most powerful stress reducers is that social connection. So this reflects back upon, how your school environment will affect your risk factors in experiencing secondary traumatic stress. So if you have a work or a school environment that promotes, having conversations, taking time to reflect, having a buddy system or someone that you can go to if you just need a break, that will help with that connection piece and will reduce your risk of experiencing secondary traumatic stress. And then other self-care ideas, spending time with children and adolescents who are not experiencing traumatic stress will help us to regain that perspective. So a lot of times we are inundated, especially as a school counselor, I know especially as classroom teachers, we are inundated with children and adolescents who are experiencing traumatic events. And so in order to regain that perspective, have a conversation with a kiddo who has not, or have a group of students who the focus is on positive, more exciting events that are happening, and have that conversation. Engage in fun activities, find time to self-reflect, allow yourself to cry and feel those emotions, and then find things to laugh about. So I appreciate your time. If you all have any questions, I can open the floor for that. My email address is also listed here, and I feel free to please reach out to me. I would love to have conversations or bounce ideas off of each other, or if you have questions that I cannot answer, I will also ask if you would email me so that I can get back to you about those questions and find an answer for you.
Yes, Sarah, that was great. I don't see any questions in the chat. Thank you for being here. Thank you for the presentation. If you don't mind, could you share that presentation with me? That way I could link it to the schedule for everybody.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
I sent it this morning. I was under the impression that it was linked, but if it is not, I will definitely send it to you.
Okay. Well, if you sent it to, who'd you send it to this morning? Do you know? Was it Elaine, maybe?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. She'll get it linked then. That's fine. So.
Alrighty.
Well, thank you so much. We appreciate you.
I definitely appreciate the time and opportunity.
All right. Have a good Wednesday.
Oh, thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Alrighty, everybody. So that is it for us for our morning session. You can see we have an afternoon session today as well that starts at 12:30. I will be back with you for the afternoon as well. So we'll start with accessing on-demand interpretation phone and video services. We'll have the wonderful JCPS Language Services folks back. Then we will read and write through this with some Ramsey Middle School, ELA, and LMS people here. And then we'll have MTSS Behavior Support Team Specialists for middle and high school. And then we will end with using Equatio and math instructional design. So I hope you all have a great lunch. Don't forget to tune in this afternoon, and don't forget that all these videos will be available on demand for you to watch at your own pace with the power of pause. Thank you.